I thought I knew what loneliness looked like, until I watched a woman walk into a crowded wedding reception and realized she'd been seated at the table for people nobody wanted to talk to. Table 19, the forgotten corner, where they put the plus ones who came alone, the distant cousins, the charity invites. I was already sitting there, nursing my second whiskey, when she appeared in that green dress that seemed to shimmer under the chandeliers. Our eyes met for exactly 3 seconds. In those 3 seconds, I saw everything I'd been running from for the past 4 years. Hope, possibility, the terrifying chance that maybe I wasn't as alone as I'd convinced myself I was. This is the story of how a seating arrangement changed 2 lives, 2 broken hearts, and 2 kids who deserved better than parents who'd given up on love. If you want to know whether we made it, whether any of this was real, stay with me until the end. And hey, drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Lucas Hayes stood in the hotel parking lot, adjusting his tie in the side mirror of his BMW. The fabric felt foreign against his throat. He couldn't remember the last time he'd worn a full suit. 6 months? A year? Time had a way of blurring together when your life revolved around conference calls, bedtime stories, and the occasional parent-teacher meeting where you showed up alone and pretended the pitying looks didn't sting. "You look like you're about to rob a bank," he muttered to his reflection. The wedding invitation sat on his passenger seat, slightly crumpled from being shoved in his jacket pocket 3 times this week. Bradley Chen and Michelle Park request the honor of your presence. He'd known Bradley since college. They'd been roommates, stayed up until 3 in the morning, arguing about everything from philosophy to the best pizza toppings, stood up in each other's first real relationships. That was before life got complicated. Before Lucas became a single father at 28, before Bradley moved to Seattle for his startup, before they became the kind of friends who only talked twice a year and pretended it was enough. Lucas had almost RSVP'd no. The thought of flying to California, leaving his 4-year-old son Jackson with his mother for the weekend, sitting through a 5-hour celebration of love and commitment when his own marriage had imploded so spectacularly, it all felt like volunteering for emotional torture. But Jackson had pushed him. "You need friends, Daddy," his son had said last Tuesday, completely unprompted, while they were building a Lego spaceship. "You're always home." 4 years old and already worried about his father's social life. The thought had made Lucas laugh, then made him want to cry, then made him book the plane ticket before he could talk himself out of it. Now here he was. The Monarch Hotel, a sprawling resort-style venue with too many fountains and the kind of manicured gardens that probably cost more to maintain than his monthly mortgage. Through the tall windows he could see the reception in full swing, tables covered in white linens, centerpieces that looked like they'd been arranged by someone with a graduate degree in flower architecture, and everywhere, couples, holding hands, dancing, existing in that easy synchronicity that comes from not having to shoulder everything alone. He grabbed the invitation and headed inside. The ballroom hit him like a wave of sound and light. A jazz band occupied one corner, playing something smooth and romantic. Waiters glided between tables with trays of champagne. The bride and groom stood near the entrance, greeting late arrivals with the kind of radiant happiness that made Lucas both genuinely pleased for his friend and acutely aware of his own isolation. "Lucas, man, you made it!" Bradley pulled him into a hug that smelled like expensive cologne and joy. "I saw you RSVP'd, but I wasn't sure you'd actually show." "Couldn't miss your big day," Lucas said, returning the embrace with real warmth. "Congratulations. Michelle looks stunning. Doesn't she?" Bradley's gaze drifted to his new wife with an expression that Lucas remembered wearing once, a long time ago. "Hey, I'm sorry about the seating. We tried to put you with some of my college crew, but the final numbers got messy and—" "Don't worry about it," Lucas interrupted. "I'm happy to be here." "Where am I?" Bradley grimaced slightly. "Table 19. It's, kind of in the back corner. We had some last-minute cancellations and— Look, I'm sorry. I know it's not ideal." "It's fine, really. There's a woman there, actually, Sophia. She's Michelle's college friend. Came alone, too. Her daughter got sick last minute, so she couldn't bring her. Maybe you two can keep each other company?" Lucas nodded, not really processing the words. He was already calculating how long he'd need to stay before leaving wouldn't be rude. 3 hours? 4? He could make small talk that long. He'd survived worse. Table 19 sat in the furthest corner of the ballroom, partially obscured by a decorative column and what appeared to be an emergency exit. The other seats were occupied by an elderly couple who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else, a teenage boy absorbed in his phone, and two middle-aged women engaged in what seemed like an intense discussion about real estate prices. And then there was her. She sat with her back straight, hands folded in her lap, staring at the untouched champagne glass in front of her like it might contain answers to questions she hadn't asked yet. The green dress Bradley's wife had clearly insisted on for wedding photos caught the light in a way that made her seem almost luminous. But it was her face that stopped Lucas mid-step. Not because she was beautiful, though she was, in that understated way that took a moment to register, but because of her expression. She looked exactly how he felt. Present, but not really there. Going through motions that had stopped meaning anything a long time ago. He approached the table, and as if sensing his presence, she looked up. Their eyes met. For 3 full seconds, neither of them moved. Lucas felt something shift in his chest, some long dormant recognition that had nothing to do with memory and everything to do with instant, inexplicable understanding. She had dark eyes that reflected the chandelier light, an uncertain smile forming at the corners of her mouth, and the kind of weariness that only comes from carrying too much for too long. "Hi," he said, his voice coming out rougher than intended. "I think I'm at this table." "Oh." She blinked, the spell breaking. "Yes, sorry, I was just—" She gestured vaguely at nothing. "Spacing out, I guess." Lucas pulled out the chair across from her and sat down, suddenly hyper-aware of every movement. Lucas Hayes. "Sophia Bennett." She extended her hand, and when he took it, her grip was firm, businesslike, the handshake of someone who'd learned to project confidence even when she didn't feel it. "Friend of the bride or groom?" "Bride. We went to UCLA together, roommates for 2 years." She paused. "You?" "Groom. College roommates. Different coast, though. We were at NYU. Small world." "Getting smaller every year," Lucas said, then immediately regretted it because it sounded like something his father would say. He grabbed a champagne glass from a passing waiter, needing something to do with his hands. Sophia smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "I almost didn't come tonight." The honesty caught him off guard. Most people at weddings performed enthusiasm, pretended they wouldn't rather be home in comfortable clothes watching television. "Yeah? Yeah, it—" She picked up her own glass finally and took a small sip. "My daughter, Emma, she's 6. She's been fighting a cold all week. My mom offered to watch her tonight, but she was upset that she couldn't come. Kept asking why Mommy's friend was getting married and why she couldn't see the pretty dress." Lucas felt something loosen in his chest. "My son's 4, Jackson. He's with my mom this weekend too. First time I've left him overnight in months." Sophia's expression shifted, some of the careful guard dropping. "Really?" "Really. He's probably eaten his weight in cookies by now and completely destroyed her living room, but she insisted she could handle it." Lucas took a drink. "Honestly, I felt guilty the entire flight here, like I was abandoning him for a party." "Yes." The word came out with force, relief. "Exactly that. Everyone keeps telling me I need to take time for myself, go out, have a life, but it's like, how do you just turn off that part of your brain? The part that's always calculating bedtimes and checking if you packed enough snacks and wondering if they're okay without you?" "You don't," Lucas said quietly. "At least I haven't figured out how." They looked at each other again, and this time the moment stretched longer. Around them, the wedding reception continued. Laughter, clinking glasses, the band transitioning into something upbeat. But at table 19, in the forgotten corner, 2 strangers had just recognized something fundamental in each other. The elderly couple got up to dance, moving with the careful synchronization of 50 years together. The teenage boy remained absorbed in his phone. The real estate women had moved on to discussing their upcoming cruise. "So," Sophia said, her voice lighter now, some invisible tension released. "Single dad?" 3 years and counting. You?" "Single mom, 4 years." Lucas did the math automatically. His divorce had been finalized when Jackson was 18 months old. Sophia must have gone through something similar around the same time. Two people, opposite coasts, parallel disasters. Do you want to talk about it? He asked, then quickly added, or we could talk about literally anything else. Weather. Politics, the inexplicable popularity of pumpkin spice. Sophia laughed, actually laughed, and the sound transformed her face completely. I vote anything else. I've already hit my quota for serious conversations today. Deal. So, pumpkin spice. Thoughts? Overrated, but I secretly love it, she admitted. You? Same. I have a candle in my apartment. Jackson calls it the fall smell. Emma made me buy pumpkin spice soap last year. It's still in my bathroom. They grinned at each other, and Lucas felt something he hadn't experienced in so long he'd almost forgotten what to call it. Not attraction, exactly, or not just attraction. It was ease. The simple, radical comfort of talking to someone who got it, who understood the specific exhaustion of single parenthood, the way it reshaped every priority and recalibrated every definition of success. A waiter appeared with dinner, some kind of chicken dish with vegetables arranged like they were posing for a magazine cover. Lucas hadn't realized how hungry he was until the food appeared. He and Sophia ate in companionable silence for a few minutes, but it wasn't awkward. It was the silence of two people who'd been making small talk at required social events for years and were tired of performing. Can I ask you something? Sophia said eventually, setting down her fork. Sure. Why did you really come tonight? I mean, the real reason, not the polite answer you'd give Bradley. Lucas considered lying, considered giving some easy response about friendship and obligation and wanting to celebrate love. Instead, he heard himself say, "My son told me I need friends. I've apparently become the kind of parent who only exists in relation to their kid," and he noticed. At 4 years old, he noticed. Sophia's expression softened. That's actually beautiful, in a heartbreaking sort of way. What about you? Why'd you come? She was quiet for a moment, twisting her napkin in her lap. Michelle called me 2 weeks ago, told me she was worried about me, said I'd become, and I quote, a ghost of myself. That all I do is work and take care of Emma, and I've forgotten how to be Sophia, the person who used to stay up until dawn arguing about philosophy and dreaming about traveling the world. She looked up, meeting his eyes. I came to prove her wrong, to show her I was fine. But the truth is, I sat in my hotel room for an hour before the ceremony trying to convince myself to go home. I'm glad you didn't. Yeah? Yeah. Lucas meant it more than he'd meant anything in a long time. The band started playing something slow and romantic. Couples flooded the dance floor, including Bradley and Michelle, who moved together like they'd been choreographing this moment their entire lives. The lights dimmed slightly, candlelight taking over, and the whole scene became so aggressively romantic that Lucas would have found it nauseating if he weren't sitting across from someone who seemed equally disarmed by it. Do you dance? Sophia asked suddenly. Not well. You? I used to, before Emma, before everything. She watched the dancers with an expression Lucas couldn't quite read. I took ballroom lessons in college. Michelle and I used to go every Tuesday night. It was ridiculous and wonderful, and I haven't thought about it in years. We could, Lucas started, then stopped. Never mind. What? I was going to suggest we dance, but I don't want to step on your feet and ruin the memory. Sophia smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. You know what? I'll risk it. They stood up, and Lucas felt absurdly nervous, like he was 16 again asking someone to prom. They made their way to the edge of the dance floor, not quite in the middle where the spotlight would find them, but not hiding at table 19 either. Some kind of middle ground. He placed one hand on her waist, feeling the smooth fabric of her dress under his palm, and took her other hand in his. She fit against him in a way that felt simultaneously foreign and familiar. They started moving, and Lucas immediately stepped on her foot. Sorry, I warned you. It's fine, Sophia said, laughing. Just follow me. That might violate some traditional gender norm. I think we're past worrying about traditional anything. She was right. Lucas let her lead, and after a few stumbling moments, they found a rhythm. Not graceful, not the kind of dancing that would make anyone stop and stare, but theirs. They moved together in small circles, close enough that he could smell her perfume, something light and floral that suited her completely. So tell me about Jackson, Sophia said quietly. What's he like? Lucas felt his whole face change when he talked about his son. He knew it did, couldn't help it. He's everything, honestly. Obsessed with dinosaurs right now. Knows more about the Cretaceous period than I do about my own job. He's sensitive, smart, asks questions I have no idea how to answer. He paused. Like 2 days ago, he asked me why he doesn't have a mommy who lives with us like his friend Tyler does. And I had to explain, again, that sometimes families look different, and that's okay. But I could see in his face that he didn't think it was okay. He just didn't want to make me sad. Sophia's hand tightened slightly on his shoulder. Emma does the same thing. She asked me last month why Daddy doesn't love us anymore. Not why he left. Why he doesn't love us. Like it's a puzzle she can solve if she just figures out what she did wrong. What did you tell her? The truth. That her father made his own choices, and they have nothing to do with how amazing and lovable she is. That love sometimes breaks in ways we can't fix, but that doesn't mean it was ever her fault. Sophia's voice had gone rough. She cried for an hour. I just held her and let her cry and wanted to murder my ex for putting that thought in her head in the first place. They danced in silence for a moment, the weight of shared experience hanging between them. Lucas had been to therapy after the divorce, had done the work of processing his anger and grief, and the specific betrayal of a partner who'd chosen to leave rather than try. But he'd never quite found the words for this particular pain, the pain of watching your child suffer for adult mistakes, of knowing you couldn't protect them from the consequences of love gone wrong. "Do you have family nearby?" he asked. "For help with Emma?" "My mom's about 20 minutes away. She's amazing. I don't know what I'd do without her, but I still feel guilty every time I ask her to babysit, like I'm failing at doing this alone." Sophia shook her head. "What about you?" "Same. My mom's in Brooklyn. I'm in Manhattan. She's been incredible. But there's always this voice in my head saying I should be able to handle everything myself. That needing help makes me weak or incompetent, or, I don't know, less than. You're not, though. Incompetent. How would you know? We just met." Sophia pulled back slightly to look at him, and her expression was serious. "Because you're here. Because your son told you he was worried and you listened. Because you showed up to a wedding alone even though it's terrifying. Because you're trying." She paused. "That's more than a lot of people do." Lucas felt something crack open in his chest, some carefully maintained wall he'd built to keep functioning. "Thank you," he managed. "For what?" "For getting it. For being here. For not making me feel crazy for finding all of this so hard." "Right back at you." The song ended, transitioning into something faster that required actual dancing skills neither of them possessed. They stood still for a moment, neither quite willing to let go, before Lucas stepped back and gestured toward their table. "Should we?" "Yes. Before someone makes us do the electric slide." They returned to table 19, but everything felt different now. The forgotten corner had become theirs, a space carved out from the performance of the wedding, from the pressure to be happy and social and fine. They settled back into their seats, and this time when their eyes met, Sophia didn't look away. "Can I ask you something else?" Lucas said. "You're full of questions tonight." "I'm out of practice with actual adult conversation. Work with me." Sophia smiled. "Ask away. What do you do?" "For work, I mean." "I'm a graphic designer, freelance mostly, which means I work weird hours and Emma occasionally appears in the background of video calls, but it gives me flexibility." She tilted her head. "You?" "Corporate consulting, financial strategy, restructuring, the deeply thrilling world of profit optimization." He said it with just enough irony that she'd know he wasn't entirely serious. "It pays well, which matters when you're the only income, but it's not exactly what I dreamed about doing when I was younger." "What did you dream about?" The question hit him sideways. Nobody asked that anymore. "Architecture, actually. I wanted to design buildings, create spaces where people could live and work and feel something, connected, maybe, inspired." He laughed, self-conscious. "Instead, I help corporations figure out how to squeeze more efficiency out of their operations." "That's sad," Sophia said bluntly. "Excuse me?" "Not you, the situation, that you gave up something you loved because life got complicated. That's genuinely sad." Lucas didn't know what to say. She wasn't wrong, but nobody had ever put it so plainly before. "What about you? Is graphic design what you dreamed about? Close enough. I wanted to be a fine artist, painter specifically, abstracts and landscapes and things that made people feel instead of think. She gestured at herself. Now I design logos and marketing materials and occasionally get to do something creative if the client isn't terrible. It's not the dream, but it's not nothing. Do you still paint? Sometimes, late at night when Emma's asleep and I can't shut my brain off, I have a corner of my apartment set up with an easel and paints and all the supplies I swore I'd use regularly. She smiled wryly. I think I've finished 3 paintings in the last year. That's 3 more than I've designed buildings. Touché. They talked through dinner service, through dessert, through the cake cutting and the bouquet toss and the best man speech that was too long and not quite funny enough. They talked about everything and nothing. Favorite movies, childhood pets, the absurdity of modern dating apps that they'd both downloaded and immediately deleted, the specific exhaustion of solo bedtime routines, the small victories that nobody else seemed to understand. Lucas told her about the time Jackson had learned to tie his shoes and treated it like he'd discovered fire. Sophia told him about Emma's obsession with marine biology and her dream of becoming a shark scientist. So they compared notes on the best chicken nuggets, Costco brand, unanimous decision, the worst children's television shows, a surprising amount of overlap, and the exact moment when they'd each realized their marriages were over. She told me she'd met someone else, Lucas heard himself say, surprised by his own honesty. My ex-wife. Just sat me down one day and said she'd been having an affair for 6 months, that she loved him, that she wanted a divorce. Jackson was barely walking. I remember holding him that night after she left, and he was so small and had no idea his whole world had just imploded. Sophia reached across the table and touched his hand, just briefly. I'm sorry. What about you? He left when I was 8 months pregnant. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were somewhere else. Just came home one day and said he'd made a mistake, that he wasn't ready to be a father, that he needed to find himself or some similar bullshit. Packed a bag and left. I've seen him twice since Emma was born. Once when she was 2, once last year. Both times he brought her gifts and made promises about staying in touch. Both times he disappeared for months afterward. Jesus, Sophia. Yeah. She pulled her hand back, wrapping both around her water glass. The worst part isn't even that he left. It's that he comes back just enough to give Emma hope, to make her think maybe this time will be different. And I have to watch her get excited and know, absolutely know, that he's going to let her down again. They sat with that for a moment, the weight of it settling between them. Around them, the wedding continued its celebration of love and commitment and forever, seemingly oblivious to the fact that forever didn't always last. We're a pair, Lucas said finally. We really are. Do you think... He stopped, uncertain how to finish the question. What? Do you think we ever get past it? The betrayal, the anger, all of it? Or does it just become part of who we are? Sophia considered this, her gaze drifting to the dance floor where Bradley and Michelle swayed together, lost in their own world. I don't know. Some days I think I'm fine, that I've processed everything and moved on. Other days I'm so angry I can barely function. And underneath it all, there's this fear that I've forgotten how to trust anyone, that I've built so many walls to protect Emma and myself that I wouldn't know how to let someone in even if I wanted to. That's exactly it, Lucas said, the recognition sharp in his chest. That fear that you're broken in some fundamental way, that you'll never be able to do this again, any of this, without constantly waiting for it to fall apart. Do you want to? Do this again, I mean. Eventually. The question should have been too personal, too soon. They'd known each other for barely 3 hours, but somehow, in this forgotten corner, normal rules didn't seem to apply. I don't know, Lucas admitted. I want Jackson to see what healthy love looks like. I want him to know that commitment doesn't always end in abandonment, but the thought of actually trying again, of putting myself out there and risking... He shook his head. It's terrifying. Yeah. They fell into silence again, but it was comfortable now, familiar. The band had transitioned to slower, jazzier numbers. The crowd had thinned as guests left or retreated to the bar. Only the die-hard dancers remained, couples who'd probably been waiting all night for an excuse to hold each other close. Sophia, Lucas said, and something in his tone made her look up sharply. I need to tell you something. Her expression shifted, guard coming back up. Okay, I knew who you were before tonight, before we sat down. She went very still. What? Michelle sent me your Instagram last week. She told me you were coming alone, that you'd been having a hard time, that maybe we'd get along. She was trying to, I don't know, set us up, maybe? Or at least make sure we both had someone to talk to at table 19. He met her eyes, needing her to see the truth in his. I looked at your photos, your artwork, the pictures of Emma. And when I walked in tonight and saw you sitting here, I knew. I chose to sit down. I chose to start this conversation. Sophia's face had gone through several expressions: surprise, confusion, anger, something that might have been hurt. When she finally spoke, her voice was carefully controlled. So this whole night was what? Some kind of setup? You playing the part Michelle wanted you to play? No, God no. Sophia, listen to me. I didn't know if I'd even approach you. When I saw you sitting here, looking like I felt, I almost walked away. But then you looked up, and I saw something in your eyes that I recognized, and everything I'd planned to say disappeared. These last 3 hours, this conversation, this connection, it's the most real thing I've experienced in years. But you still lied. You let me think this was random, that we just happened to be at the same table. Because I was scared, Lucas interrupted. Because if I'd told you up front that I'd been sent your profile, that I'd looked you up, that I'd come here partly hoping to meet you, you would have thought I was a creep or desperate or running some kind of game. And maybe I am desperate. Maybe we both are. But what happened tonight, the way we talked, the way I feel sitting across from you, that wasn't manipulation. That was just two people recognizing something in each other. Sophia stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Several heads turned. She grabbed her clutch, hands shaking slightly, and Lucas's heart dropped into his stomach. Sophia, please. I need some air. She walked away quickly, navigating through tables toward the terrace doors. Lucas sat frozen for exactly 3 seconds before he followed her. Outside, the California night was cool and clear, fairy lights strung through the trees, the distant sound of waves hitting the shore. Sophia stood at the terrace railing, her back to him, shoulders rigid. I shouldn't have followed you out here, Lucas said quietly, but I couldn't let you leave thinking I'd been playing some game. Weren't you, though? She turned to face him, and her eyes were bright with unshed tears. You had all this information about me, formed opinions, decided whether I was worth approaching, and I walked in completely blind. That's not equal. That's not fair. You're right, it's not. So why should I believe anything you said in there was real? Lucas took a careful step closer. Because I told you the truth. Not the easy version, not the polite lie that would have kept things smooth. The actual truth, even though I knew it might ruin everything. Because I couldn't sit there with you, feeling this connection, and know I was holding something back. Because maybe I'm tired of performing and pretending and being careful all the time. That's not good enough. Then what would be? Sophia wiped at her eyes angrily. I don't know. Maybe nothing. Maybe I'm so used to people lying that I can't recognize honesty anymore. Maybe I'm so scared of being hurt again that I'm looking for reasons to push you away before you get the chance. The admission hung between them, raw and exposed. Lucas understood completely. That impulse to sabotage, to reject before being rejected, to maintain control by never letting anyone close enough to wound you. Can I tell you something else, he said? Something I didn't say in there? I guess you might as well. When I looked at your Instagram, there was a photo of you and Emma at the beach. She was holding up a seashell, and you were looking at her with this expression of complete love and joy and presence. And I thought, that's what I want Jackson to see in me more often. That ability to be fully there, fully present, not halfway distracted by everything I'm carrying. You looked happy in that photo. Not perfect or performing, just genuinely, simply happy. And I realized I hadn't felt that way in longer than I could remember. Sophia's expression softened slightly. That was from last summer. We went to Santa Monica for her birthday. She has your smile. Everyone says she looks like her father. Maybe. But she has your smile. Lucas moved to the railing, keeping distance between them, but close enough to talk without raising his voice. I'm not asking you to trust me. I know I don't deserve that yet. But I'm asking for a chance to prove that tonight wasn't just some desperate single parent trying to fill a void. That what I felt sitting across from you, the ease, the recognition, the sense that maybe I'm not as alone as I thought, was real. Sophia was quiet for a long time, her gaze fixed on the dark ocean beyond the lights. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I came here tonight wanting to prove I was fine, that I didn't need anyone, that I'd built a good life for Emma and me and we were complete, just the two of us. Yeah? But sitting at that table with you, talking about things I never talk about, feeling understood in ways I haven't felt understood in years, it made me realize how lonely I've been. How much I've been pretending everything is fine when really I've just been surviving. She turned to look at him, and that terrifies me. Because needing someone, depending on someone, that's how you get hurt. I know. So what do we do? Lucas hadn't expected the question to come back to him. I don't know. I'm as scared as you are, but maybe... He paused, trying to find words for something he wasn't sure he understood himself. Maybe we don't have to figure it all out tonight. Maybe we can just acknowledge that something happened here, something neither of us expected, and see if it holds up in the real world. The real world where I live in California and you live in New York? The real world where we both have kids and jobs and complicated lives that don't leave much room for whatever this is. So it's impossible. Maybe. Lucas met her eyes. Or maybe possible is overrated and what matters more is whether it's worth trying. The sound of the waves filled the silence that followed. Inside, through the terrace doors, the wedding wound down. Guests were leaving, calling for cars, saying goodbyes with the slightly exaggerated affection of people who'd been drinking champagne for hours. I need to think, Sophia said finally. That's fair. Can I have your number? I'm not promising anything, but... Yes. Lucas pulled out his phone, opened a new contact. Put yours in. No pressure. If you want to talk, talk. If you don't, I'll understand. She took his phone, fingers moving across the screen, then handed it back. Her contact information glowed on the display. Sophia Bennett, a California number. Nothing else. I should go, she said. My flight's early tomorrow, and I need to get back to Emma. I'm not leaving until Monday. I'm having brunch with Bradley tomorrow. That's nice. That you two stayed close. We didn't, really. It was actually the first time we've really talked in over a year. Life gets busy. Yeah, it does. They stood there awkwardly, neither quite knowing how to end this. A hug seemed too intimate after everything, a handshake too formal. Lucas settled for a small smile and a nod. Thank you, he said. For tonight, for talking to me, for being honest, even when I didn't deserve it. Thank you for telling me the truth. Eventually. Sophia walked past him toward the terrace doors, then stopped and turned back. Lucas? Yeah? That thing you said about architecture? About wanting to design spaces where people feel connected. You should do that. Find a way back to it. Life's too short to give up on the things that matter. Before he could respond, she was gone, disappearing into the thinning crowd inside. Lucas stood alone on the terrace, her words echoing in his head, the smell of ocean air mixing with the lingering scent of her perfume. He pulled out his phone, looked at her contact information, and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Not quite hope, but maybe the possibility of hope. The sense that maybe, just maybe, the forgotten corner of table 19 had been exactly where he was supposed to be all along. Inside, the band played one final song. Lucas stayed outside, watching the waves, thinking about seating arrangements and Instagram profiles and the way Sophia's hand had felt in his when they danced. Thinking about Jackson, about what he'd want his son to see him do in this moment. Walk away, stay safe, protect himself from the possibility of more pain, or take a risk. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown California number. I'm glad we sat at table 19 tonight. Lucas stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back. Me too. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, maybe we could talk more when we're both home, when the real world hasn't quite crashed back in yet. I'd like that. Okay then. Good night, Lucas. Good night, Sophia. He slipped the phone back into his pocket and allowed himself a smile. The wedding was ending. Guests were leaving. Table 19 would be cleared away by morning, another forgotten detail in someone else's perfect day. But for two people who'd walked in alone, expecting nothing, something had shifted. Something had begun. And whether it led anywhere or crashed and burned spectacularly, well, that was tomorrow's problem. Tonight, for the first time in longer than he could remember, Lucas Hayes felt something other than tired. He felt alive. The flight back to New York felt longer than it should have. Lucas kept checking his phone, reading and rereading the brief text exchange from the night before, analyzing the words like they contained some hidden code he needed to crack. The woman in the seat next to him had fallen asleep before takeoff, her head tilted at an angle that would definitely result in neck pain later, and Lucas envied her ability to just shut off and rest. His mind wouldn't stop replaying moments from the wedding, the way Sophia had looked when she first sat down at table 19, the sound of her laugh when he'd admitted to owning pumpkin spice candles, the expression on her face when he'd told her the truth about knowing who she was. He'd screwed that up. No question. But she'd texted him anyway. That had to mean something. His phone buzzed just as the plane began its descent into JFK. A message from his mother. "Landing soon? Jackson's been asking about you all morning. Made him chocolate chip pancakes, but he says yours are better. Liar, obviously." Lucas smiled and typed back, "Landing in 20. Be there in an hour. Tell him my pancakes are definitely not better, and he's just being nice. He's 4. He doesn't know how to be nice yet. He's honest. Fair point." Jackson had inherited Lucas's bluntness, along with his dark hair, and tendency to overthink everything. At 4 years old, he'd already mastered the art of asking uncomfortable questions at the worst possible times. Last month at the grocery store, he'd asked, loudly, why the woman in front of them had so much hair on her face. Lucas had wanted to dissolve into the floor. The plane touched down with a slight jolt. Lucas gathered his carry-on, navigated through the terminal, and caught a cab into the city. Sunday afternoon traffic was lighter than usual, and he made it to his mother's brownstone in Fort Greene just after 2. She opened the door before he could knock. Margaret Hayes was 63, sharp as ever, with gray hair she refused to dye and eyes that saw through every deflection Lucas had attempted since childhood. "You look different," she said immediately. "Hello to you too, Mom." "I'm serious. Something happened in California." She stepped back to let him in. "Was the wedding that good?" "It was fine." "Where's Jackson?" "Living room. He's been building some kind of dinosaur habitat all morning. I'm not allowed to touch anything." She studied Lucas's face. "Are you going to tell me what happened, or do I have to drag it out of you?" "There's nothing to tell." "Lucas Andrew Hayes, I changed your diapers. I know when you're lying." Before Lucas could respond, a small body slammed into his legs with enough force to nearly knock him over. "Daddy, you're back!" He scooped Jackson up, breathing in the smell of syrup and chocolate that seemed to be a permanent part of his son's aura. "Hey, buddy, I missed you." "I missed you more. Grandma let me stay up late and we watched 2 movies and I had ice cream for breakfast." "Ice cream for breakfast?" Lucas looked at his mother, who shrugged unapologetically. "It was Sunday. Rules are different on Sundays." Jackson wriggled out of his arms and grabbed Lucas's hand, tugging him toward the living room. "Come see what I built. It's a whole world for the velociraptors, and they have a cave and everything." The living room had been transformed into what could only be described as controlled chaos. Couch cushions formed mountains, blankets draped over chairs created caves, and plastic dinosaurs of varying sizes and scientific accuracy populated the landscape. Jackson launched into an elaborate explanation of the ecosystem he'd created, complete with hunting grounds and nesting areas and something he called the danger zone, where the T-Rex lived. Lucas sat on the floor and listened, letting his son's enthusiasm wash over him, trying to be fully present instead of mentally replaying conversations from the night before. But his phone sat heavy in his pocket, and he couldn't stop wondering if Sophia had made it home safely, if she'd picked up Emma from her mother's, if she was thinking about him at all. "Daddy, you're not listening." Lucas snapped back to attention. "Sorry, bud. What did you say?" "I asked if we could get a real dinosaur." "Dinosaurs are extinct, remember?" "What about a lizard? A really big lizard? We'll talk about it." The universal parental response that meant absolutely not, but I don't want to argue right now. Margaret appeared in the doorway with 2 mugs of coffee. She handed one to Lucas and settled into her armchair, the one she'd had since Lucas was a kid, worn leather that molded to her shape. "Jackson, honey, why don't you show me the danger zone again? I think I forgot where the T-Rex sleeps." Jackson, delighted to have another audience member, immediately launched into his explanation again, this time with more dramatic sound effects. Margaret caught Lucas's eye over the dinosaur presentation and mouthed, "We're talking later." Lucas nodded, resigned to the inevitable interrogation. An hour later, after Jackson had finally tired himself out and settled on the couch with a book about marine animals, his interests were eclectic and constantly shifting. Margaret cornered Lucas in the kitchen. "So," she said, refilling her coffee mug, "tell me about her." "I don't know what you're talking about." "The woman who put that look on your face, the one you've been checking your phone for every 5 minutes. Lucas considered denying it again, then gave up. His mother would extract the information eventually anyway. "Her name is Sophia. She was at the wedding. We talked." "Just talked?" "Just talked." He paused. "But it was different than anything I've felt in a long time." Margaret's expression softened. "Different how?" "Like I could breathe for the first time in years. Like someone actually understood what it's like to do this alone." He gestured vaguely at the living room where Jackson hummed to himself, lost in his book. "She has a daughter, 6 years old, single mom. We got each other, you know?" "Where does she live?" "California." "Ah." Margaret took a long sip of coffee. "That complicates things." "Yeah, and there's more." Lucas told her about Michelle's setup, about looking at Sophia's Instagram, about the moment on the terrace when he'd confessed and watched her face close off. "I almost ruined it before it even started. But she texted me after, said maybe we could talk more." "Have you talked more?" "Not yet. I got home and I don't know what to say. What if I text her and she doesn't respond? Or what if we talk and it turns out the whole night was just wedding magic and it doesn't translate to real life?" Margaret set down her mug and looked at him with the particular brand of directness she reserved for when he was being deliberately obtuse. "Lucas, you've spent 3 years building walls around yourself, being so careful not to get hurt again that you've forgotten how to actually live. Now you meet someone who makes you feel something real and you're already looking for reasons it won't work. I'm being realistic. You're being scared." She reached across the counter and squeezed his hand. "And I get it. What Jennifer did to you, leaving when Jackson was so small, the affair, all of it, it was brutal. But you can't let her mistakes define the rest of your life. Or Jackson's." Lucas pulled his hand back, defensive. "Jackson is fine. We're fine." "Are you?" "Because that boy in there asked me yesterday why other kids have 2 parents and he only has 1. Asked me if he did something wrong that made his mother leave." The words hit Lucas like a physical blow. "He what?" "He's 4, honey. He's starting to notice things, starting to wonder. And he needs to see you be brave enough to try again, to show him that love, real love, is worth the risk." Lucas stared at his coffee, throat tight. "What if I can't? What if I'm too broken to do this right?" "Then you'll figure it out as you go, like everyone else does." Margaret stood up, moving around the counter to pull him into a hug that smelled like her rose-scented lotion and decades of comfort. "Text her, talk to her, see where it goes. Stop protecting yourself from something that might actually make you happy." That evening, after saying goodbye to his mother and getting Jackson home and through the chaos of dinner and bath time and the extended bedtime routine that somehow always took twice as long as planned, Lucas finally sat down on his couch with his phone. The apartment was quiet except for the ambient noise of the city, sirens in the distance, someone's television through the walls, the general hum of 8 million people living on top of each other. He pulled up Sophia's contact information and stared at it for a full minute before typing, "Hey, made it back to New York. Hope you got home safely." He hit send before he could overthink it, then immediately wanted to take it back. Too casual? Too formal? Should he have said something about the wedding, referenced their conversation, acknowledged the elephant in the room? 3 minutes passed. 5. Lucas set the phone down, picked it up again, forced himself to open his laptop and review a presentation for tomorrow's meeting. He made it through 2 slides before his phone buzzed. "Hi." "Yeah, I got back yesterday afternoon. Emma was so excited to see me, she tackled me in the driveway. My mom said she was perfect all weekend, but I think that's grandmother code for she asked about you constantly, and I bribed her with cookies." Lucas felt something unclench in his chest. He typed back, "Jackson did the same thing. According to my mom, he had ice cream for breakfast and stayed up past midnight." I'm choosing to believe she's exaggerating. She's definitely not. My mom told Emma she could paint her toenails, and now she wants to do mine too. I'm currently sporting sparkly purple polish. That's actually pretty great. It's ridiculous. I look like I lost a fight with a craft store. I bet you look beautiful. He sent it before his brain could catch up with his fingers, then stared at the message in horror. Too much. Way too much. They'd had one conversation at a wedding, and now he was complimenting her appearance via text like some kind of... His phone rang. Sophia's name lit up the screen. Lucas answered, heart hammering. Hi. Hi. Her voice sounded different over the phone, softer, closer. Sorry, texting felt suddenly ridiculous for what I wanted to say. What did you want to say? That I've been thinking about you since I left California. That I got on the plane home and immediately started second-guessing everything that happened, convincing myself it was just a moment, just the romance of a wedding and too much champagne. But then Emma asked me why I was smiling at my phone, and I realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd done that. Smiled at something that wasn't her, wasn't work, wasn't just me going through the motions. Lucas closed his eyes, letting her words sink in. I know exactly what you mean. Do you? Because I'm terrified, Lucas. I'm terrified that I'm reading this all wrong, that you were just being polite, and I'm about to make a complete fool of myself. You're not. Reading it wrong, I mean. He stood up, too restless to sit still. I haven't been able to stop thinking about you either. About the way you understood things I didn't have to explain, about how easy it was to talk to you about stuff I never talk about. The cross-country distance thing is kind of a problem, though. Yeah, it is. And we both have kids and complicated lives. Also true. So what do we do? Lucas walked to his window, looking out at the Manhattan skyline lit up against the dark sky. We could try. Start small. Talk on the phone, video calls maybe. See if what we felt at the wedding holds up when we're both back in reality. Long distance getting to know you while juggling single parenthood? Sophia's tone was wry. That sounds impossibly complicated. Most things worth doing are. She was quiet for a moment, and Lucas could hear background noise on her end. Water running, maybe dishes clanking. I'm doing Emma's lunch prep for tomorrow while we talk, she said, as if reading his mind. She's very particular about how her sandwich is cut. Triangles only, no crust. Jackson won't eat anything green, claims it's all poison. Even broccoli? Especially broccoli. I've tried hiding it in everything. He has some kind of sixth sense. Sophia laughed, and the sound made Lucas smile despite himself. Emma went through that phase last year. Now she'll eat anything as long as I tell her it gives her shark powers. I'm stealing that. Be my guest. Single parents have to share survival tactics. They fell into an easy rhythm after that, trading stories about their kids, their jobs, the mundane details of daily life that suddenly felt interesting when shared with someone who actually wanted to hear them. Sophia told him about a difficult client who kept requesting revisions that contradicted previous revisions, creating an endless loop of creative frustration. Lucas told her about a project at work that was hemorrhaging money and how he'd been brought in to figure out why, only to discover the answer was simple mismanagement that nobody wanted to admit to. Do you like it? Sophia asked. The consulting work? Lucas considered lying, giving the polished answer he used at networking events. Not really. It's challenging and it pays well, but it doesn't mean anything, you know? I'm not building anything or creating anything. I'm just making rich people richer. So why keep doing it? Because it's stable. Because Jackson needs health insurance and a college fund, and I can't take risks when I'm the only income. That's practical, but also kind of sad. Yeah, well, welcome to adulthood. He paused. What about you? Do you like the freelance design work? Some days, when I get a client who actually trusts me to do my job and create something meaningful, it's great. When I'm designing my 50th generic logo for a startup that'll be dead in 6 months, it's soul-crushing. She sighed. I keep telling myself I'll get back to real art someday. Actually paint instead of just thinking about painting. You should. You should design buildings. Touché. I'm serious, though. Life's too short to spend it doing work that makes you miserable just because it's safe. Says the woman doing exactly that. Which is how I know I'm right. Sophia's voice had gone softer. We're both settling, Lucas. Playing it safe because we got hurt, and we're scared of getting hurt again, but what kind of example does that set for our kids? The question hit harder than Lucas expected. You sound like my mother. Smart woman. Terrifying woman. She already knows about you, by the way. What? Sophia's surprise was evident. How? Apparently I have a tell. She took one look at me when I picked up Jackson and knew something had happened. What did you tell her? The truth. That I met someone at the wedding who made me feel something I haven't felt in years. That you live in California and have a daughter, and I have no idea how to make this work, but I want to try. Sophia was quiet for so long Lucas thought the call had dropped. You there? I'm here. I'm just processing. You really told your mom all that? She's going to meet you eventually if we keep talking. Might as well start being honest now. Lucas Hayes, are you already planning for me to meet your mother? He heard the teasing in her tone and relaxed slightly. Maybe? Is that crazy? Completely insane. A pause. But also kind of sweet. They talked until Lucas realized it was nearly midnight and he had an early meeting. Sophia had gotten through Emma's entire lunch prep, cleaned her kitchen, and started a load of laundry, the mundane soundtrack of their conversation, making it feel simultaneously ordinary and extraordinary. I should let you go, Lucas said reluctantly. Yeah. Early meeting? 8 a.m. presentation. You? Client call at 9, plus Emma's school drop-off, which is always an adventure. Can we do this again? Talk, I mean. I'd like that. Sophia's voice was warm. Same time tomorrow? It's a date. Is it? A date? Lucas smiled. Yeah, I think it is. Okay then. Good night, Lucas. Good night, Sophia. He hung up and sat in the quiet of his apartment, feeling something he couldn't quite name. Not happiness exactly. It was too soon for that, too uncertain, but possibility. The sense that maybe the walls he'd built around himself didn't have to be permanent. The next 3 weeks fell into a pattern. They talked every night after their kids went to bed, conversations that started at 9 p.m. and often stretched past midnight. They texted throughout the day, photos of their kids, complaints about work, random observations about life. Lucas learned that Sophia drank her coffee black, hated running but forced herself to do it anyway, and had a tendency to reorganize her kitchen cabinets when she was stressed. Sophia learned that Lucas could quote entire episodes of the terrible children's shows Jackson loved, had a secret addiction to crime podcasts, and talked to his plants because he'd read somewhere it helped them grow. They video called on weekends, and Lucas got to see Sophia's apartment, small but filled with light, artwork on every wall, photographs of Emma everywhere. Sophia saw his place too, the slightly sterile bachelor pad that he'd never quite made feel like home, Jackson's toys scattered across every surface despite his best attempts at organization. You need more color, Sophia said during one of their calls, her face pixelated slightly on his screen. Everything's gray and white. It's modern. It's depressing. Where's your personality? I have a 4-year-old. My personality is exhaustion. She laughed. Fair. But seriously, you should put up some art. Make it feel like you actually live there instead of just exist there. Are you offering to paint me something? Maybe, if you're nice to me. I'm always nice to you. You called my favorite movie pretentious garbage last week. Because it is. 3 hours of people staring meaningfully at landscapes while nothing happens. It's called atmosphere and character development. It's called boring. Yes, they argued about movies, books, whether pineapple belonged on pizza. Sophia said yes, Lucas said absolutely not. The best way to make scrambled eggs, and whether it was acceptable to eat cereal for dinner when you were too tired to cook. Unanimous yes. They talked about serious things too, their divorces, the lingering anger and hurt, the ways they'd each changed since becoming single parents. Lucas told her about the first year after Jennifer left, when he'd barely been functioning, when his mother had essentially moved in to help because he couldn't manage work and a toddler simultaneously. Sophia told him about giving birth to Emma alone, her ex having left 2 weeks before her due date, the terror and loneliness of those first months. I used to cry in the shower, she admitted one night. It was the only place Emma couldn't hear me. I'd turn the water on hot and just sit there and cry until I couldn't anymore, then pull myself together and go be her mom. I did the same thing, Lucas said quietly. except it was in my car. I'd drive to work early, sit in the parking garage, and just lose it for 10 minutes. Then I'd wipe my face and go pretend everything was fine. We're quite the pair. Yeah, we really are. During their 4th week of talking, Jackson got sick. Nothing serious, a fever and a cough, but enough that Lucas had to cancel a major presentation and work from home while simultaneously trying to keep a miserable 4-year-old comfortable and entertained. He texted Sophia an apology that he might not be able to talk that night. She called him at noon. "How's he doing?" she asked without preamble. "Feverish and cranky. He's currently watching his 3rd episode of some show about talking trains and eating nothing but popsicles." Poor baby. And poor you. I've had worse days. Lucas moved to the kitchen, keeping an eye on Jackson through the doorway. I just feel guilty, you know? Like I should be able to handle work and taking care of him, but I can barely manage both. Lucas, he's sick. You're allowed to struggle. Tell that to the partners at my firm who are definitely judging me for missing the presentation. They can judge all they want. You're doing what you need to do for your kid. That's what matters. Something in her tone made Lucas ask, "Does Emma get sick a lot?" The usual kid stuff. Lots of colds, a couple of ear infections last year. The worst was when she got the stomach bug, and I got it too. We were both miserable for 3 days, and I had no backup. She paused. It's the hardest part, I think, when they need you and you're barely keeping it together yourself, but you have to keep going because there's no one else. Yeah, Lucas said softly. That's exactly it. They talked while Lucas made Jackson soup that he probably wouldn't eat, while Sophia worked on a logo design that was due the next day, falling into the comfortable silence of just being present even when they weren't actively talking. It felt intimate in a way Lucas hadn't expected. More intimate than the late-night conversations, more real than the video calls where they both made sure the lighting was good and the background wasn't too messy. This was actual life, unglamorous and exhausting and real. And Sophia didn't run from it. "Thank you," Lucas said eventually. "For what?" "For calling. For not making me feel like I'm failing because I can't do everything perfectly." Lucas, nobody does everything perfectly. We're all just doing our best and hoping it's enough. Jackson called from the living room asking for more juice in a pathetic voice that Lucas knew was at least 50% genuine and 50% dramatic performance. "I should go. The patient requires attention. Give him a hug for me." "I will. Talk later?" "Definitely." That night, after Jackson had finally fallen asleep and Lucas had cleaned up the disaster area that was his apartment, he texted Sophia a photo of his son passed out on the couch, curls plastered to his forehead, clutching his favorite dinosaur toy. Crisis averted. "Fever's down. Thanks for talking me through it." Her response came immediately. "Anytime. That's what partners do." Lucas stared at the word. Partners. They'd been talking for less than a month, had spent exactly one evening together in person, lived 3,000 miles apart. But somehow, that word felt right. He typed back, "Partners. I like that. Me too. Sophia, yeah? I want to see you again, in person, I mean." The 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally. "I want that too. But how? We can't exactly do casual coffee dates. What if I came to California? Next month, maybe. I could arrange my schedule, visit for a weekend. What about Jackson? My mom would watch him. She's been telling me I need to do something for myself. That's a big trip for a second date. Is that what this would be? Our second date? I guess it would be." Lucas waited, giving her space to think, to process. He knew what he was asking, for her to let him into her real life, to risk more than phone calls and text messages, to make this undeniably, terrifyingly real. "Okay," she finally sent. "Yeah? Yeah. Come visit. Meet Emma. See if this whole thing actually works outside of wedding receptions and late-night phone calls." "You sure?" "Absolutely not. But I'm doing it anyway." Lucas laughed out loud, startling himself in the quiet apartment. "That might be the most honest thing anyone's ever said to me. I'm trying this new thing where I tell the truth even when it's scary." "How's that working out?" "Terrifying, but also kind of liberating." They made plans, tentative, subject to change, but real plans. Second weekend in October. Lucas would fly in Friday night, stay through Sunday. They'd figure out the rest as they went. After they hung up that night, Lucas sat on his couch and thought about what he was doing. Flying across the country to see a woman he'd met once, planning to meet her daughter when he'd been so careful to keep his dating life, such as it was, completely separate from Jackson, risking everything on the possibility that what he felt wasn't just loneliness or desperation or the fantasy of connection with someone who understood. His phone buzzed. Another message from Sophia. "Still there?" "Yeah." "Just thinking." "Second thoughts?" "No. Just scared." "Me too. But maybe that means it matters." Lucas looked at Jackson, still asleep on the couch, tiny and perfect, and the entire reason Lucas had rebuilt his life from scratch 3 years ago. He thought about what his mother had said, about showing his son what it looked like to be brave, to try again even when you'd been hurt. He typed, "It definitely matters. Then I'll see you in October. See you in October." Lucas carried Jackson to bed, tucked him in with his dinosaur, and stood in the doorway watching him sleep. Tomorrow he'd wake up and go to work and deal with the fallout from missing his presentation. Tomorrow he'd have to explain to the partners why his personal life had interfered with his professional obligations. Tomorrow would bring all the regular chaos and stress and responsibility that defined his existence. But tonight, standing in his son's doorway with his phone still warm in his hand, Lucas Hayes let himself believe in possibility. In the idea that maybe broken people could find each other and build something new. That maybe Table 19 hadn't been the forgotten corner after all, but exactly where he was meant to be. That maybe, just maybe, taking a risk on someone who made him feel alive again was worth whatever came next. October arrived faster than Lucas expected and slower than he wanted. The weeks between making plans and actually getting on a plane felt simultaneously endless and terrifyingly brief. He'd wake up in the middle of the night, heart pounding, convinced he was making a massive mistake. Then Sophia would send him a good morning text, usually a photo of Emma doing something ridiculous, or a complaint about her coffee maker breaking again. And the panic would settle into something manageable. They'd established rhythms by now. Morning texts while getting their kids ready for school, lunch check-ins when work allowed. The nightly phone calls that had become as essential to Lucas as sleep, maybe more so. He'd learned the cadence of Sophia's voice, could tell within 3 words whether she'd had a good day or a brutal one. She'd learned the same about him, calling him out when he tried to downplay his stress or pretend he wasn't drowning in work obligations. "You're doing that thing again," she'd said 2 nights ago. "What thing?" "The thing where you act like everything's fine when you're clearly falling apart. I can hear it in your voice." "I'm not falling apart." "Lucas?" He'd sighed, defeated. "Okay, maybe I'm slightly coming apart at the seams. Jackson's having nightmares again. Work is insane, and I can't figure out how to tell my boss I need a personal day to fly across the country for a woman I've technically only met once." "Have you tried telling him the truth? That I'm ditching work responsibilities to pursue a relationship that might be completely in my head?" "Yeah, that'll go over great." "It's not in your head," Sophia had said quietly, "and you're allowed to have a life outside of work and parenting. You know that, right?" Lucas hadn't known how to answer that, so he'd changed the subject. But the words had stayed with him, circling in his brain during meetings and conference calls, and the endless minutes of Jackson's bedtime routine. Now he stood in his apartment, a carry-on bag packed and repacked 3 times sitting by the door, trying to explain to his son why Daddy was leaving for the weekend. "But where are you going?" Jackson asked for the 5th time, looking up at Lucas with those enormous dark eyes that could break his heart with a single glance. "California." "I told you, buddy, to visit a friend." "What friend?" "Her name is Sophia. She's nice. I met her at Uncle Bradley's wedding." Jackson processed this with the intense concentration he applied to all new information. "Does she have kids?" "She does. A daughter named Emma. She's 6. "That's older than me." "Just by 2 years." "Is she nice?" "I think so. I haven't met her yet." Jackson frowned, clearly troubled by this inconsistency. "But you're going to visit her mom?" Lucas crouched down to Jackson's eye level, hands on his son's small shoulders. "Yeah, I am, because sometimes grown-ups want to spend time with other grown-ups, get to know them better." "Like a play date?" "Kind of like a play date, yeah." "Can I come?" The question hit Lucas harder than it should have. Not this time, bud. But you're going to have so much fun with Grandma. She said something about the Natural History Museum and making cookies. Jackson's expression remained skeptical. You promise you'll come back? Of course I'll come back. I always come back. Mommy didn't. The words landed like a physical blow. Lucas pulled Jackson into a hug, feeling his son's small body press against him, trying to find words that would matter, that would fix the damage Jennifer had done when she'd walked away and stayed away. I'm not Mommy, Lucas said finally. I will always come back to you, always. That's a promise I will never, ever break. Jackson nodded against his shoulder, but didn't say anything else. They stayed like that for a long moment before Lucas's mother appeared in the doorway, overnight bag in hand, and the kind of knowing expression that meant she'd heard the entire exchange. Ready to go, Jackson? Margaret asked brightly. I thought we could stop for ice cream on the way to my place. Ice cream before dinner? Jackson pulled back from Lucas, immediately distracted. Special occasion. Your dad's being brave and doing something scary, so we should celebrate. Lucas shot his mother a look that clearly said, Was that necessary? She smiled serenely back. Jackson grabbed his backpack, already listing the ice cream flavors he wanted to try. Lucas walked them down to the street, helped buckle Jackson into Margaret's car, and stood on the sidewalk waving as they drove away. His son's face appeared in the back window, small hand pressed against the glass, and Lucas had to force himself not to call the whole thing off. The flight to Los Angeles was smooth and unremarkable, which gave Lucas entirely too much time to spiral. He downloaded a podcast about Byzantine history to distract himself, but couldn't focus on anything except the growing certainty that he was about to make a spectacular fool of himself. What if the connection he felt was entirely one-sided? What if Sophia had built him up in her mind into someone he couldn't possibly be? What if he met Emma and she hated him? Or worse, what if he didn't know how to talk to her? His phone buzzed as the plane began its descent. A text from Sophia. Please tell me you're actually on the plane and didn't chicken out. He typed back, currently descending into LAX and having a minor panic attack. Does that count as chickening out? Only if you don't get off the plane. I'm already here. Parked in the cell phone lot and stress-eating granola bars. You drove to the airport? You flew across the country. Driving 30 minutes seemed like the least I could do. Is Emma with you? No, she's with my mom. I thought maybe we should have tonight to ourselves before I throw you into the chaos of a 6-year-old who hasn't stopped talking about meeting my special friend for the past week. Lucas felt something warm spread through his chest. Special friend? She's 6. I wasn't going to say the man Mommy talks to on the phone every night who makes her smile like an idiot. Do I, though? Make you smile like an idiot constantly. It's embarrassing. The plane touched down and Lucas made his way through the terminal, bag in hand, heart doing things that felt medically concerning. He changed clothes twice before leaving his apartment, finally settling on jeans and a button-down that his mother had declared approachable but put together. Now he wondered if he should have gone more casual, or if the shirt was trying too hard, or if Sophia would take one look at him in person and realize the whole thing had been a mistake. He spotted her before she saw him. She stood near the baggage claim, wearing a light blue dress and a leather jacket, scanning the crowd with an expression that matched exactly how Lucas felt. Nervous, hopeful, terrified. Her hair was down instead of pulled back like in the video calls, and she looked somehow more real than she had on his phone screen, more solid and present and there. Then her eyes found his, and everything else disappeared. She smiled, tentative at first, then wider as he walked toward her. Lucas forgot about all his spiraling thoughts, all his carefully planned opening lines, and just crossed the distance between them. Hi, he said when he reached her. Hi yourself. Sophia's voice was exactly as he remembered from the wedding, warm and slightly breathless. You're really here. I'm really here. They stood there for a moment, neither quite sure what to do. Hug? Kiss? Shake hands like business associates? The awkwardness stretched until Sophia laughed and stepped forward, wrapping her arms around him in a hug that felt like coming home. Lucas held her, breathing in the same floral scent from the wedding, feeling the reality of her against him. She was shorter than he remembered, the top of her head just reaching his shoulder, and she fit against him in a way that made him think maybe this wasn't completely insane after all. You smell like airplane, she said against his shirt. Sorry, 5-hour flight in recycled air. It's okay. I'll allow it. She pulled back but kept one hand on his arm like she needed to maintain the connection. Are you hungry? We could grab dinner before heading back to my place. Starving. Airplane peanuts don't really count as food. They made their way to the parking structure, falling into conversation as easily as they did on the phone. Sophia had chosen a restaurant halfway between the airport and her apartment, some Italian place she promised had the best pasta in Santa Monica. Lucas tried not to notice how natural it felt when she reached for his hand in the parking lot, tried not to overthink the way his fingers automatically laced through hers. The restaurant was small and loud, the kind of neighborhood spot where everyone seemed to know each other. They were seated at a corner table near the window, and Lucas watched Sophia scan the menu with the same intensity she probably applied to her design work. Okay, real talk, she said, setting down the menu. How freaked out are you right now? On a scale of 1 to 10, probably a solid 8. Same. I've changed clothes 4 times today, and Emma asked me why I was acting weird and jumpy. What did you tell her? That I was excited to introduce her to someone new, which is true, but also massively understating the situation. Sophia leaned back in her chair, studying him. You look different in person. Different how? More real, I guess. On video calls, you're all pixels, and sometimes the connection is bad, and your face freezes in weird expressions. But now you're actually here, and I can't believe we're doing this. Having second thoughts? Third and fourth thoughts. But I'm still here, so that has to count for something. The waiter appeared and they ordered pasta for both of them and wine that Sophia promised was better than anything served at the wedding. When they were alone again, Lucas found himself studying her face, cataloging the small details that didn't translate over phone screens. The way her left eyebrow lifted slightly when she was amused, the small scar on her chin that he'd never noticed before, the exact shade of her eyes, which weren't quite brown but weren't hazel either. You're staring, Sophia said. Sorry, I've spent weeks talking to you on a screen and now you're right here and my brain is trying to reconcile the difference. And does the real version match the phone version? Better. Lucas meant it. Definitely better. Sophia's smile was worth the entire flight. Good answer. Dinner stretched into 2 hours of conversation that felt like no time at all. They talked about everything they hadn't covered in their nightly calls. Childhood stories, college disasters, the small moments that had shaped them into who they were now. Lucas told her about the summer he'd spent backpacking through Europe after graduation, thinking he'd find himself, or purpose, or some greater meaning, only to come home exactly as confused as when he'd left. Sophia told him about the year she'd spent in New York trying to make it as an artist, sleeping on friends' couches and waiting tables while sending out portfolio after portfolio to galleries that never responded. Wait, Lucas said. You lived in New York? When? Right after college, 22 to 23. I was broke and determined and completely naive about how the art world actually works. I was in New York then too. Different reasons, but same city, same time frame. We probably walked past each other a dozen times and never knew it. The thought sent a strange feeling through Lucas's chest. Parallel lives. Yeah, makes you wonder what else we missed before table 19. Their food arrived and they ate while continuing to talk. The conversation flowing as easily as it did on the phone, but with an added dimension of physical presence. The way Sophia gestured with her fork when she got excited about something. The sound of her laugh in real space instead of compressed through speakers. The casual intimacy of sharing a meal with someone who felt both familiar and thrillingly new. Tell me about Emma, Lucas said eventually. Really tell me, not just the highlights you share on the phone. Sophia's whole demeanor shifted when she talked about her daughter, softening in ways that made Lucas think of how he felt when discussing Jackson. She's brilliant and stubborn and asks questions I have no idea how to answer. Last week she wanted to know why the ocean is salty, and I had to Google it because I genuinely didn't know. What's the answer? Something about minerals from rocks and underwater volcanoes. She was satisfied for about 10 minutes before asking why volcanoes exist in the ocean if water puts out fire. Lucas laughed. Jackson does the same thing. It's like a never-ending chain of why. Exactly. And she's obsessed with sharks, has been since she was 4. Knows more about great whites and hammerheads than most marine biologists. She wants to be a shark scientist when she grows up. Marine biologist? Yeah, but she thinks that sounds boring, so she insists on shark scientist. I love that. She's also terrified of the dark, refuses to wear anything that isn't purple or pink, and has to sleep with exactly 4 stuffed animals arranged in a specific order, or she can't fall asleep. Sophia paused. And she's desperate for a father figure. She doesn't say it directly, but I see it in how she acts around my friend Rachel's husband, or how excited she gets when my dad visits. She wants that so badly, and I can't give it to her. That's not your fault. Intellectually, I know that, but emotionally, I feel like I'm failing her every single day. Lucas reached across the table and took her hand. You're not failing her. You're showing her what strength looks like, what dedication looks like. She's going to grow up knowing her mom fought for her, chose her, never gave up on her. That matters more than having 2 parents. Sophia's eyes were bright with unshed tears. How do you always know the right thing to say? I don't. I just know what I needed to hear when I was drowning in guilt about Jackson. They sat like that for a moment, hands linked across the table, the noise of the restaurant fading into background static. Lucas had dated a few times since his divorce, awkward coffee meetings arranged by well-meaning friends, one disastrous attempt at an app-based date that had ended in mutual disinterest, but nothing had felt remotely like this. This sense of being seen, understood, matched in ways that had nothing to do with surface compatibility and everything to do with recognizing your own struggle in someone else's eyes. I'm scared of introducing you to her, Sophia admitted. Not because I don't want you to meet her, but because if she likes you and this doesn't work out, it's one more person who left, one more disappointment. I get that. I've kept my personal life completely separate from Jackson for the same reason. But Sophia, we can't live our entire lives protecting them from every possible hurt. Sometimes you have to take the risk. Is that what this is? A risk worth taking? Lucas didn't hesitate. Yes. After dinner, they drove to Sophia's apartment, a modest 2-bedroom in a complex with a courtyard full of plants that somehow thrived despite the Southern California drought. She gave him a tour that took approximately 3 minutes. Living room filled with art supplies and Emma's toys, small kitchen with a window that overlooked the courtyard, Emma's room painted lavender with glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling, and Sophia's room, which was surprisingly minimalist compared to the rest of the apartment. I spend all my creative energy on work in Emma's space, she explained, gesturing at the simple bed and dresser. By the time I get to my own room, I just want blank walls and peace. They settled on the couch with tea. Sophia didn't have coffee in the house after 8 p.m., a rule she'd implemented after too many nights of insomnia, and talked until Lucas noticed it was past midnight. I should probably head to my hotel, he said reluctantly. Or you could stay here. Sophia said it quickly, like she might lose courage if she didn't. On the couch, I mean. It's late and you're exhausted, and honestly, I'm not ready for you to leave yet. Lucas should have said no, should have maintained some kind of boundary, some sense of propriety. Instead, he said, okay. Sophia found him a blanket and pillow, showed him where the bathroom was, and then stood awkwardly in her living room like she wasn't sure how to end the evening. This is weird, right? She said. Having you here in my space after weeks of phone calls? Weird but good? Yeah, weird but good. She moved closer, and Lucas stood up from the couch, suddenly very aware of how small her apartment was, how close they were standing. Thank you for coming, for taking the risk. Thank you for letting me. Sophia reached up and touched his face, fingers light against his jaw. Lucas held very still, afraid to move, afraid to break whatever moment this was. Then she stood on her toes and kissed him, brief and soft and over too quickly. Good night, Lucas. Good night. She disappeared into her room and Lucas sank back onto the couch, touching his lips like a teenager after his first kiss. His phone buzzed with a text from his mother, Jackson's asleep. He made me promise you'd call tomorrow. How's it going? Lucas typed back. Better than I could have hoped. Tell Jackson I'll call in the morning. That good? Yeah, that good. I'm happy for you, honey. Now go to sleep. You'll need your energy for tomorrow. Lucas set an alarm and tried to sleep on a couch that was definitely not designed for someone 6 feet tall. But he didn't care. He was 3,000 miles from home in a stranger's apartment that somehow didn't feel strange at all, and for the first time in years, He felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Morning arrived with sunlight streaming through the windows and the sound of Sophia moving around the kitchen. Lucas woke disoriented, back aching from the couch, and needed a solid minute to remember where he was and why. Coffee? Sophia appeared in the doorway, already dressed in jeans and a sweater, hair pulled back in a ponytail. Please. She handed him a mug and sat in the chair across from him. Sleep okay? Your couch is terrible. I know. Emma jumped on it so many times that the springs are shot. I keep meaning to replace it. They drank their coffee in comfortable silence for a moment before Sophia said, So, Emma, what time is she coming home? My mom's dropping her off at 10, which gives us about an hour to prepare you for the hurricane that is my daughter. I'm good with kids. You're good with your kid. 6-year-old girls who ask questions about everything and have opinions on topics you didn't know kids had opinions about are a different species entirely. Lucas laughed. Fair point. Any advice? Be honest. She can smell bullshit from a mile away, and she'll probably interrogate you about your intentions toward her mother, so be ready for that. She's 6. She's 6 going on 30. Trust me. At precisely 10 a.m., a knock sounded on the door. Sophia took a deep breath and opened it to reveal an older woman who shared Sophia's features, and a small girl with dark curls and eyes that took in everything with intense curiosity. Mommy! Emma launched herself at Sophia with the kind of enthusiasm that nearly knocked her over. Hey, baby, did you have fun with Grandma? We made pancakes and watched movies, and she let me stay up late. Emma pulled back, then spotted Lucas on the couch. Who's that? Emma, this is Lucas, the friend I told you about. Lucas, this is my daughter, Emma. Lucas stood up, suddenly nervous in a way he hadn't been since job interviews fresh out of college. Hi, Emma. It's nice to meet you. Emma studied him with an expression far too serious for a 6-year-old. You're the one who makes Mommy smile at her phone? Sophia made a strangled sound. Emma, it's okay, Lucas said, crouching down to Emma's eye level. Yeah, I guess I am. Your mom makes me smile at my phone too. Do you have kids? I do. A son named Jackson. He's 4. That's younger than me. It is. He's pretty cool, though. He knows everything about dinosaurs. Emma's eyes lit up. I know about sharks. Did you know that great white sharks can detect 1 drop of blood in 25 gallons of water? I did not know that. That's amazing. And hammerhead sharks have eyes on the sides of their heads so they can see almost everywhere at once? Also amazing. Emma seemed satisfied with this exchange. She turned to Sophia's mother, who had been watching with obvious amusement. Grandma, can I show Lucas my shark books? That's up to your mom, sweetheart. Sophia looked at Lucas, a question in her eyes. He nodded, and she smiled. Sure, baby. Show Lucas your collection. Emma grabbed Lucas's hand with zero hesitation and dragged him toward her room, already launching into an explanation of the difference between reef sharks and deep-sea sharks. Lucas caught Sophia's eye over Emma's head, and she mouthed, sorry, but she was smiling. The next hour disappeared into the world of sharks. Emma showed him every book in her collection, explained her favorite species, and quizzed him on facts she'd just taught him. Lucas found himself genuinely engaged, asking questions that made Emma's face light up, impressed by her knowledge and enthusiasm. When Emma finally ran out of shark facts, at least temporarily, Lucas asked, So what else do you like, besides sharks? Art, like Mommy, and swimming, and purple things. She gestured at her room, which was indeed very purple. What is your son like? Dinosaurs, mostly. And building things with blocks. And he's recently decided he wants to learn guitar even though his hands are way too small. That's silly. Yeah, but he's determined. Emma was quiet for a moment, then asked with devastating directness, Are you Mommy's boyfriend? Lucas's brain briefly short-circuited. That's a good question. She talks about you a lot. Grandma says she hasn't smiled this much in forever. Your mom is pretty great. Are you going to stay? Or are you going to leave like my dad did? The question hit Lucas square in the chest. He looked at this small girl who'd already been abandoned by one parent and was asking if she should risk caring about another adult who might disappear. He thought about Jackson asking if he'd come back, about the fear that lived in both their children because of adults who'd failed them. "Emma," he said carefully, "I can't promise I'll never make mistakes or that everything will be perfect. But I can promise that if your mom and I keep getting to know each other, I'm not going to just disappear. That's not the kind of person I am." She studied him with those two old eyes. "Okay, but if you make mommy cry, I'll be very mad." "That's completely fair." Emma nodded, satisfied with this arrangement, and went back to organizing her shark books by species. Lucas stood up, legs cramping from sitting on the floor, and found Sophia standing in the doorway. "How much of that did you hear?" he asked quietly. "Enough." Her eyes were bright. "You're good with her." "She's remarkable." "She's a lot." "The best people usually are." They spent the rest of the weekend in a bubble that felt separate from reality. Lucas met Sophia's mother officially, a warm woman named Patricia who asked pointed questions about his intentions and seemed satisfied with his answers. They took Emma to the aquarium, where she narrated every exhibit with the confidence of a marine biologist. They had dinner at Sophia's apartment, and Lucas helped Emma set the table while Sophia cooked, the domestic routine feeling both foreign and strangely natural. Sunday evening arrived too quickly. Lucas's flight was at 8, which meant leaving Sophia's apartment by 5 to account for traffic and security. He'd repacked his bag that morning, trying to extend every moment, every conversation, every glimpse of what life could look like if 3,000 miles and their complicated situations didn't exist. Emma cried when he said goodbye, wrapping her small arms around his legs and asking when he'd come back. Lucas looked at Sophia helplessly, not wanting to make promises he couldn't keep, but also unable to break this child's heart. "We'll figure it out, baby," Sophia said, picking Emma up. "Lucas has to go home to Jackson, but we'll talk to him lots on the phone. But I want him to stay." "I know, me too." Lucas hugged them both, feeling Emma's tears soak into his shirt, feeling Sophia's hand grip the back of his jacket, like she was physically holding herself back from asking him not to go. The drive to the airport was quiet. Sophia held his hand while she drove, neither of them quite ready to talk about what happened next. At the terminal, she pulled over in the passenger drop-off zone and finally looked at him. "So," she said. "So, that was... yeah. Lucas, I need to tell you something." Sophia's voice was shaking slightly. "Before you get on that plane, before we go back to phone calls and texts and trying to make this work long distance, I need you to know that this weekend wasn't just good. It was everything. Watching you with Emma, having you in my space, feeling like maybe I'm not doing this alone anymore. It terrified me and thrilled me and made me realize I'm in way deeper than I thought." Lucas reached over and took her face in his hands. "I'm in deep too. So deep I can't see the surface anymore." "What do we do?" "We figure it out. One day at a time, one phone call at a time. We make it work because the alternative is walking away. And I won't do that." "You promise?" "I promise." He kissed her then, not the brief goodnight kiss from Friday, but something deeper, more desperate, the kiss of two people who'd found something real and had no idea how to hold on to it across 3,000 miles of distance. When they finally pulled apart, Lucas grabbed his bag and forced himself to open the car door. "I'll text you when I land." "You better." He walked into the terminal without looking back, afraid that if he did, he'd never get on the plane. His phone buzzed before he'd even made it through security. A text from Sophia. "Emma says you have to come back soon because she hasn't taught you about whale sharks yet." Lucas smiled through the tightness in his throat and typed, "Tell her I'll be back as soon as I can." "And Sophia, thank you for the best weekend I've had in years. Thank you for making me believe this is possible." The flight home felt longer than the one out. Lucas stared out the window at clouds and darkness, thinking about Emma's shark facts and Sophia's laugh and the way it had felt to sit at her kitchen table while she cooked dinner, like he belonged there. Like maybe broken people could find each other and build something new from the pieces. His phone buzzed again as the plane pushed back from the gate. One final text from Sophia before he had to switch to airplane mode. "This is crazy and terrifying, and I'm doing it anyway. Don't make me regret it." Lucas typed back, "I won't. That's a promise I intend to keep." Then he turned off his phone and closed his eyes, already counting the days until he could figure out a way to see her again. The weeks after California were harder than Lucas had anticipated. Not because anything had gone wrong. If anything, the visit had gone too right, had shown him exactly what he was missing every single day he woke up 3,000 miles away from Sophia and Emma. But knowing what he wanted and figuring out how to actually have it were two completely different problems, and Lucas had always been better at solving other people's problems than his own. Jackson noticed the change immediately. Kids always did. "You're sad again," he said one morning over breakfast, wielding his spoon like he was conducting an investigation. "I'm not sad, buddy, just tired." "You're on the phone all the time now, with Sophia." Lucas looked up from his coffee, surprised. "Does that bother you?" Jackson shrugged with the elaborate indifference only a 4-year-old could manage. "She sounds nice. When do I get to meet her?" "I don't know yet. It's complicated." "Why?" "Because she lives far away. In California, remember, where I went to visit?" "We could move there?" Lucas nearly choked on his coffee. "It's not that simple." "Why not?" "Because my job is here, and Grandma is here, and your school and your friends, and everything we know." Jackson processed this with a frown that looked eerily similar to Lucas's own expression when he was working through a difficult problem. "But you like Sophia." "I do." "And she makes you not sad." "She does." "Then we should go where she is." "That's what you tell me. If something makes you happy, you should do more of it." Out of the mouths of 4-year-olds. Lucas reached across the table and ruffled Jackson's hair. "When did you get so smart?" "I've always been smart. You just don't listen." Later that night, after Jackson was asleep and Lucas was staring at his laptop pretending to review financial reports, his phone rang. Sophia's face filled the screen, and he answered immediately. "Hey. Hey yourself." She looked tired, hair pulled back messily, and he could see Emma's artwork taped to the wall behind her. "Bad time?" "Never a bad time for you. What's wrong?" "Why do you assume something's wrong?" "Because I can hear it in your voice. What happened?" Sophia sighed, and the sound carried 2 months of accumulated stress. "Emma asked me today when you're coming to visit again. I told her I didn't know, and she started crying. Full meltdown, the kind I haven't seen since she was 3. Kept saying she doesn't understand why everyone leaves. Why can't you just stay? Why does everything good have to go away?" Lucas felt the words like a punch to the chest. "Sophia, and the worst part is, I don't have a good answer. I don't know when you're coming back. I don't know how we make this work long term. I don't know how to explain to my 6-year-old daughter that sometimes loving someone means accepting that they can't always be there. I want to be there." "I know you do. But wanting and doing are different things. And we both have kids and jobs and lives that don't exactly allow for spontaneous cross-country relocations." She rubbed her eyes, and Lucas wished desperately that he could reach through the screen and pull her close. "I'm sorry. I'm not trying to pick a fight. I'm just exhausted and scared, and I don't know what we're doing anymore." "We're trying, that's what we're doing." "Is trying enough, though? When we see each other once every 2 months, if we're lucky? When our kids are getting attached to someone they barely know? When I lie in bed every night wishing you were here instead of on a screen?" Lucas was quiet for a moment, the weight of all the conversations they'd been avoiding settling between them. "What are you saying, that we should stop?" "No, maybe. I don't know." Sophia's voice cracked. "I just know that this is harder than I thought it would be. Missing you is harder. Explaining to Emma why you can't just come over for dinner is harder. Pretending I'm okay with phone calls when what I really want is you physically here is so much harder than I ever imagined. So what do we do?" "I think you need to come back, soon. Not for a weekend visit, but for a real conversation about whether this is sustainable or if we're just torturing ourselves." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implications neither of them wanted to examine too closely. Lucas thought about Jackson's comment that morning, about moving to California like it was the simplest thing in the world. Thought about his job, his mother, the life he'd carefully rebuilt after Jennifer left. Thought about what it would mean to uproot everything for a relationship that was barely 4 months old. "Thanksgiving," he heard himself say. "I'll come for Thanksgiving week. We can talk then." "Lucas, you don't have to." "I want to. Jackson and I were supposed to spend it with my mom, but she'll understand. And maybe it's time for Jackson and Emma to actually meet. If we're going to figure this out, they should be part of the conversation." Sophia's expression shifted.
surprise mixing with something that looked like hope. "You'd bring Jackson? If you're okay with it, if Emma's okay with it, she'll be thrilled."
She talks about him constantly, makes up stories about what they do together. Sophia paused. "Are you sure? That's a big step." "I'm sure. Terrified, but sure." They talked for another hour, the tension easing as they made tentative plans. Lucas would fly out the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, stay through the following Monday. Jackson would miss 3 days of preschool, which felt manageable. Sophia would take the time off work. They'd figure out the rest as they went. After they hung up, Lucas sat in the quiet of his apartment and tried to imagine what he was committing to. A week in California with his son, introducing Jackson to a woman and her daughter who'd become impossibly important in an impossibly short time. Putting all 4 of them in the same space and seeing if the magic held or if reality would shatter whatever they'd built through screens and distance. His phone buzzed with a text from his mother. "Jackson told me you're moving to California. Care to explain?" Lucas typed back. "He's 4 and has an active imagination. We're not moving anywhere. But you're thinking about it." "How do you always know everything?" "I'm your mother. It's literally my job." "So are you? Thinking about it?" Lucas stared at the question for a long moment before answering honestly. "Yeah, I am." "Good. It's about time you did something crazy for the right reasons." The next 6 weeks crawled by with the particular torture of anticipation mixed with dread. Lucas threw himself into work, trying to bank enough goodwill that taking a full week off wouldn't torpedo his standing at the firm. He talked to Jackson about the trip, explaining that they were going to meet Sophia and Emma, that it was important, that he needed Jackson to be on his best behavior. "Will Emma like me?" Jackson asked the night before their flight, suddenly uncertain in a way that broke Lucas's heart. "She's gonna love you. You're smart and funny and kind. How could she not?" "What if she thinks I'm weird?" "Then she thinks you're weird. But I bet she won't. I bet you two are gonna get along great." Jackson didn't look convinced, but he packed his backpack with his favorite dinosaurs and the book about marine animals that Lucas had bought specifically so he'd have something to talk to Emma about. Watching his son prepare for this meeting with the seriousness of a diplomatic mission, Lucas felt the full weight of what he was doing. This wasn't just about him and Sophia anymore. It was about 2 kids who'd already been hurt by absent parents, who were about to be thrown together with no guarantee this would work out. The flight to Los Angeles was an adventure in managing a 4-year-old's energy and questions. Jackson wanted to know everything about Emma, what she looked like, what she liked, whether she'd want to play dinosaurs or if he needed to pretend to care about sharks. Lucas answered as best he could, all while wrestling with his own anxiety about seeing Sophia again, about whether the chemistry would still be there, or if distance and pressure would have killed whatever they'd found at table 19. Sophia was waiting at baggage claim, Emma bouncing beside her with barely contained excitement. Lucas spotted them first and felt something in his chest simultaneously loosen and tighten. Sophia looked nervous and beautiful and real, and Emma was already scanning the crowd like she was on a mission. Then Emma saw them and screamed, "Lucas!" loud enough that several people turned to stare. She ran toward them with the fearlessness of a child who'd already decided they were safe, and Lucas crouched down just in time to catch her hug. "You came back! You brought Jackson!" Lucas straightened up, Emma still clinging to him, and looked at Jackson, who had gone suddenly shy and was half hiding behind Lucas's leg. "Emma, this is my son Jackson. Jackson, this is Emma." Emma released Lucas and turned her attention to Jackson with the intensity of a spotlight. "Hi, do you like sharks? I have 17 books about sharks, and I can tell you everything. Do you want to see my favorite one? It has pictures of a megalodon, which is extinct, but used to be the biggest shark ever, and—" "Emma, breathe," Sophia interrupted gently, stepping forward. "Let Jackson actually answer." Emma paused, looking at Jackson expectantly. Jackson peeked out from behind Lucas and said quietly, "I brought you a book about the ocean. My dad said you like that stuff." Emma's eyes went wide. "Really? Can I see it?" Jackson pulled the book from his backpack and handed it over. Emma clutched it like he'd given her treasure and immediately started flipping through pages, narrating facts at a speed that made Lucas dizzy. Jackson watched her with fascination, clearly unsure what to make of this whirlwind of a person, but not entirely opposed. Lucas straightened up and finally looked at Sophia properly. She was smiling, watching the kids with an expression that made his heart do complicated things. "Hi," he said. "Hi." She stepped closer, and then they were hugging, and Lucas breathed in the familiar scent of her and felt some of the tension of the last 6 weeks dissolve. "You're really here? Both of you?" "We're really here." They collected Lucas's bag and headed to the parking lot, Emma still chattering at Jackson, who had started to warm up enough to ask questions about her shark facts. By the time they reached Sophia's car, the two kids were engaged in a debate about whether dinosaurs or sharks were cooler, which felt like the most normal thing in the world. The drive to Sophia's apartment took 40 minutes thanks to traffic, but Lucas barely noticed. He sat in the passenger seat watching Sophia drive, occasionally glancing back at the kids who'd moved on from sharks versus dinosaurs to comparing their favorite colors and foods and TV shows. They were polar opposites, Emma loud and energetic, Jackson quiet and thoughtful, but somehow they fit together in a way that made Lucas think maybe this wasn't completely insane. At the apartment, Emma immediately dragged Jackson to her room to show him her shark collection. Lucas followed Sophia into the kitchen, where she started pulling out ingredients for lunch. "They're cute together," she said, not looking at him. "Terrifyingly cute." "Jackson seems sweet, quieter than I expected. He takes after me, observes before jumping in." Lucas moved closer, unable to maintain distance when she was right there. "Sophia." She set down the knife she'd been using to slice vegetables and turned to face him. "Yeah? I've missed you. So much it hurt." "I've missed you too." She closed the distance between them and kissed him, soft and desperate and real. "I'm so glad you're here." They spent the afternoon in the careful dance of integrating their lives. Jackson and Emma played with a combination of her sharks and his dinosaurs, creating elaborate scenarios that made no scientific sense but delighted them both. Lucas and Sophia cooked together, their movements around the kitchen gradually synchronizing as they fell back into the ease they'd found during his last visit. That night, after the kids were asleep, Jackson on an air mattress in the living room, Emma in her own bed after extracting promises that Jackson would still be there in the morning, Lucas and Sophia sat on the couch with wine and the weight of conversations they'd been avoiding. "So," Sophia said, "we need to talk." "Yeah, we do." "You go first." Lucas took a breath, trying to organize thoughts that had been chaotic for weeks. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about whether this is sustainable. And the truth is, it's not. Not like this. Not with us 3,000 miles apart seeing each other every couple months and trying to pretend that's enough." Sophia's face had gone carefully neutral. "Okay. But I've also been thinking about what makes me happy, what I want my life to look like. And every time I imagine my future, you're in it, you and Emma. And this..." He gestured at the apartment, at the evidence of their blended evening. "This feels more like home than anything has in years." "Lucas, what are you saying?" "I'm saying I want to make this work, really work, which means one of us has to move, and I think it should be me." Sophia stared at him. "You want to move to California?" "I want to be where you are, where we can actually build something instead of just surviving on phone calls and hope." He reached for her hand. "I know it's crazy. I know it's too fast and too risky, and there are a million reasons why it's a terrible idea. But Jackson asked me why we couldn't just move here if you make me happy, and I didn't have a good answer. The job, my mom, familiarity, those are all real concerns, but they're not reasons. They're excuses." "What about your career? You can't just leave your firm." "I can consult from anywhere or find a new job. LA has plenty of companies that need financial strategists." Lucas squeezed her hand. "I'm not saying it'll be easy or that I have all the answers, but I'm saying I want to try. For real this time. Not long distance hoping, but actual committed trying." Sophia's eyes were bright with tears. "That's the most romantic and terrifying thing anyone's ever said to me." "Is that a yes?" "It's a, are you absolutely sure? Because if we do this and it doesn't work out, we're not the only ones who get hurt." She glanced toward the living room where Jackson slept. "Those two kids in there are already attached to each other, already building a relationship based on the assumption that we're going to make this work. If we fail them too." "I know, and that scares me more than anything. But Sophia, if we don't try, really try, we fail them anyway. We fail ourselves, and I'm tired of playing it safe and being miserable. I want to be brave enough to choose something that makes me happy. Even if it's hard? Especially if it's hard. The best things usually are. Sophia was quiet for a long moment, staring at their joined hands. When she finally looked up, her expression was determined. Okay. Okay? Okay, let's do it. Let's be completely insane and try to make this work. She laughed, slightly hysterical. I can't believe I'm agreeing to this. You can back out any time. Don't you dare give me an exit. I'm terrified enough without you offering me escape routes. She moved closer until she was practically in his lap. If we're doing this, we're doing it for real. No half measures, no safety nets. We jump together or not at all. Lucas kissed her, pouring every ounce of certainty and terror and hope into it. Together then. They stayed up until nearly 2 a.m., making plans that felt simultaneously concrete and impossible. Lucas would give his firm notice after the new year, negotiate a transition period. He'd look for consulting work in L.A. or potentially join a firm here. He and Jackson would move by spring at the latest, giving them time to find a place, get Jackson enrolled in school, handle all the logistics of uprooting a life. What about your mom? Sophia asked. She's not going to be thrilled about losing her grandson. She'll adjust, and we can visit, or she can come here. Lucas paused. She actually told me to do something crazy for the right reasons. I think she saw this coming before I did. Smart woman. Terrifying woman. You'll love her. The rest of the week passed in a blur of getting-to-know-you activities that felt like auditions for a future they were building. They took the kids to the beach, where Emma taught Jackson about tide pools and Jackson showed Emma how to build elaborate sand dinosaur habitats. They went to the aquarium again, both kids narrating every exhibit with the confidence of experts. They had dinner at Sophia's apartment every night, Lucas and Jackson gradually learning her routines, her space, the rhythm of her life with Emma. Lucas watched Sophia with Jackson and saw the same careful attention she gave Emma, asking about his interests, taking his questions seriously, making space for his quieter personality without trying to change him. He watched Jackson gradually come out of his shell around Emma, their friendship developing in fits and starts, but definitely developing. On Thanksgiving Day, they had dinner at Sophia's apartment with her mother, Patricia. Lucas had been nervous about this, meeting the grandmother, the matriarch, the person whose opinion would carry significant weight in Sophia's decision-making. But Patricia had hugged him at the door and whispered, "About time someone made my daughter smile like that." And the tension had eased. Dinner was chaotic and loud. Emma and Jackson arguing about whether cranberry sauce was gross or delicious, Patricia telling stories about Sophia's childhood that made Sophia groan and Lucas laugh. It felt like family, in a way Lucas's carefully controlled dinners with his mother never quite achieved. Messy and imperfect and real. After dinner, while Patricia took the kids outside to look at stars, Sophia pulled Lucas onto the couch. "So," she said, "verdict? On Thanksgiving?" "On all of it. The kids together. My mom. What this could actually look like if you move here." Lucas thought about Jackson's laughter when Emma had dumped an entire bottle of bubbles on his head during bath time the night before. Thought about Sophia's hand in his while they cooked, the easy way she'd integrated his son into her evening routine. Thought about Patricia's knowing looks and Emma's bedtime demand that Lucas read her a story because you do the shark voices better than mommy. "I think it could work," he said honestly. "I think it's going to be hard and complicated, and there will be days when we want to kill each other, but I think it could work." "Yeah? Yeah." He pulled her closer. "Are you having second thoughts?" "Constantly. But I'm doing it anyway because the alternative is letting fear win, and I'm tired of fear making my decisions." The night before Lucas and Jackson had to fly back to New York, Emma had a meltdown. Full tears, the kind that came from somewhere deep and primal. She didn't want them to leave. She didn't understand why they had to go. Why couldn't they just stay? Lucas held her while she cried, Sophia watching from the doorway looking helpless. Jackson sat on the floor looking distressed, clearly unsure what to do with a crying kid who wasn't him. "Emma," Lucas said gently, "I know this is hard, but Jackson and I have to go home and pack up all our stuff. Because we're coming back. For real this time. To stay." Emma pulled back, eyes red and face blotchy. Promise? I promise. It's going to take a few months to get everything ready, but we're coming back. To live here? With us? Lucas glanced at Sophia, who nodded. Yeah, to live here. Can Jackson be my brother? The question hung in the air, so much bigger than a 6-year-old could possibly understand. Lucas felt Sophia tense beside him, felt Jackson's eyes on his face. How about we start with friends, Lucas suggested, and see what happens from there? Emma seemed to accept this, and the crying stopped. She made Lucas and Jackson both promise approximately 17 times that they were coming back before finally agreeing to go to bed. Later, after both kids were asleep and Lucas was packing his bag for the early flight, Sophia sat on the edge of her bed watching him. She asked if Jackson could be her brother, Sophia said quietly. I heard. What did you think about that? Lucas stopped packing and looked at her. I think she's 6 and doesn't fully understand what she's asking, but I also think... He paused, choosing words carefully. I think maybe someday that could be possible. If we do this right, if we build something real and lasting. Are we talking about marriage? Eventually, maybe. Not now, it's way too soon. But yeah, I think eventually we're talking about combining our families for real, making this permanent. Sophia was quiet for a moment. That terrifies me. Me too. But you're still doing it? Are you? She smiled, and it was shaky but real. Yeah, I am. The flight home was bittersweet. Jackson slept most of the way, exhausted from a week of Emma's energy and new experiences. Lucas stared out the window and thought about everything that would have to happen in the next few months. Giving notice at his firm, finding a job in LA, selling his apartment or renting it out, moving his entire life across the country for a relationship that was barely 5 months old. It was absolutely insane. It was also the surest he'd felt about anything in years. When they landed in New York, Margaret was waiting at arrivals. She took one look at Lucas's face and smiled. You're really doing it, aren't you? Yeah, Mom, I think I am. She pulled him into a hug that smelled like home and history and everything he was leaving behind. Good. It's about time you chose happiness over safety. That night, after Jackson was asleep in his own bed and Lucas was alone in his apartment that would soon be someone else's home, he called Sophia. We're really doing this, he said when she answered. We're really doing this, she confirmed. Are you panicking? Completely. You? Absolutely terrified. Good. As long as we're terrified together. Sophia laughed, and the sound carried 3,000 miles and felt like it was right next to him. Together. I like that. Me too. They talked until Lucas's eyes were closing despite his best efforts, making plans and adjusting plans, and sometimes just breathing together through the phone. When they finally hung up, Lucas lay in bed and thought about Table 19, about seating arrangements and wedding receptions, and the completely random chance that had led him to sit across from a woman who understood him in ways no one else had. Except it hadn't been random at all. Michelle had arranged it, had sent him Sophia's profile, had seated them together knowing they might connect. And they had connected, so deeply and quickly that Lucas was now planning to uproot his entire life on the possibility that what they'd found could last. His phone buzzed one final time. A text from Sophia. Thank you for being brave enough to try. Lucas typed back. Thank you for being worth trying for. Then he set his phone aside and closed his eyes, already counting the days until he could stop trying long distance and start building something real. The months between Thanksgiving and the actual move were simultaneously the longest and shortest of Lucas's life. January brought notice to his firm, which went about as well as expected. Confusion, disappointment, pointed questions about whether he was making a huge mistake. February meant apartment hunting via video calls with Sophia, both of them scrolling through listings and trying to imagine a space that could hold their combined chaos. March was packing and logistics and Jackson asking approximately 600 times when they were leaving and whether Emma would still like him. Now it was April, moving day, and Lucas stood in his empty Manhattan apartment feeling the full weight of what he'd done. The movers had left an hour ago, taking the last of their belongings to a truck that would arrive in Los Angeles in 3 days. His mother had taken Jackson to her place for one final sleepover before their flight tomorrow morning. The apartment echoed with absence,
4 years of life reduced to scuff marks and holes in the walls where pictures had hung. His phone rang. Sophia. "Hey," he answered, sitting on the floor because there was nowhere else to sit. "Hey, how's it going?" "I'm sitting in an empty apartment having a minor existential crisis. How are you?" "Emma just asked me for the millionth time what time their flight lands tomorrow, and I'm stress-eating ice cream directly from the container."
So pretty standard.
Sophia paused. "Are you okay?" "Really?" Lucas looked around the apartment, this space that had been his sanctuary and his prison, where he'd rebuilt himself after Jennifer left, and where he'd spent countless nights on the phone falling for a woman 3,000 miles away. "Yeah, I think I am. It's just weird, closing this chapter." "Do you regret it?" "No, not even a little. I'm processing." "That's allowed. You're making a huge change."
We're making a huge change, Lucas corrected. You're about to have 2 more people permanently in your space. That's not exactly small. I'm terrified, Sophia admitted. What if we drive each other crazy? What if the kids don't adjust? What if you get here and realize you made a terrible mistake? What if it's perfect? Nothing's perfect. Okay, what if it's messy and hard and real, but also the best decision either of us have made? Sophia was quiet for a moment, and Lucas could hear Emma in the background asking about something shark-related. I really want that, she said finally. The messy and hard and real part. I'm just scared of disappointing you. You couldn't disappoint me if you tried. You say that now. Wait until you've lived with my morning routine and the fact that I reorganize the kitchen at 2 a.m. when I'm anxious. I snore, loudly, and I leave coffee mugs everywhere, and Jackson has decided he only eats chicken nuggets and apples, so good luck with meal planning. We're a disaster waiting to happen. The best kind of disaster. They talked until Lucas's phone battery hit 10%, making plans and adjusting plans and sometimes just breathing together across the distance that would finally close tomorrow. When they hung up, Lucas stood in the empty apartment one last time and thought about all the versions of himself who'd lived here. The one who'd moved in desperate and broken. The one who'd learned to be a single father. The one who'd gone to a wedding and met someone at table 19 who'd changed everything. That last version was who walked out the door, keys left on the counter, ready to become whoever came next. The flight to Los Angeles the next morning felt different than all the ones before. This wasn't a visit. This was permanent, irreversible, the kind of leap that meant there was no going back to the comfortable misery of before. Jackson sensed it too, unusually quiet during the flight, clutching his dinosaur and staring out the window. "Nervous?" Lucas asked. "What if Emma changed her mind about being my friend?" "She didn't." "But what if she did? What if she thinks I'm weird now that I'm going to be around all the time?" Lucas pulled his son close, this small person who'd been through so much and was now being asked to be brave again. "Emma thinks you're great, and even if things are weird at first while everyone adjusts, you two will figure it out. That's what friends do." "Are you and Sophia friends?" "Yeah, the best kind." "Are you going to marry her?" The question caught Lucas off guard, even though he should have expected it. "Maybe someday. Would that be okay with you?" Jackson considered this with the seriousness he applied to all important questions. "Would she be my mom?" "She'd be your stepmom. You already have a mom, even if she's not around." "I don't remember her very much." The admission broke Lucas's heart. "That's okay. You were really young when she left." "Would Emma be my sister?" "Stepsister, yeah. If Sophia and I got married," Jackson nodded slowly, processing. "I think I'd like that, having a sister, even if she talks about sharks too much." Lucas laughed and kissed the top of his son's head. "Me too, buddy." Sophia and Emma were waiting at arrivals, holding a handmade sign that read, "Welcome home, Lucas and Jackson," in letters that were definitely Emma's work, slightly crooked and covered in drawings of dinosaurs and sharks. Emma spotted them first and launched herself at Jackson with the force of a small missile, nearly knocking him over. "You're here. You're really here. I made you a welcome present and Mommy helped, but I did most of it, and you're going to love it, and—" "Emma, let him breathe," Sophia said, but she was smiling as she stepped forward to hug Lucas. "Welcome home." Home. The word settled in Lucas's chest, warm and terrifying and right.
He held Sophia and watched their kids already engaged in animated conversation about something Jackson had brought from New York, and felt the last of his doubt dissolve. This was happening. This was real.
The apartment Sophia had found for them was bigger than her old place, a 3-bedroom in a complex with a courtyard and a pool that had sold Emma immediately. Lucas and Jackson's belongings wouldn't arrive for 2 more days, so Sophia had set them up temporarily. Air mattresses, borrowed furniture, the bare minimum to function while they waited. "It's not much right now," Sophia said, showing Lucas around while the kids explored. "But once your stuff gets here and we actually unpack, it'll feel more like home." "It already does," Lucas said honestly. The apartment was still mostly empty, but it had Sophia's artwork on the walls, Emma's toys in the corner, the lived-in warmth that his Manhattan apartment had never quite achieved. "Where's Jackson sleeping?" "Emma's been campaigning for him to share her room, but I thought maybe we should start with separate spaces. There's a room for him across the hall from hers, but we can rearrange if—" Lucas kissed her, cutting off the nervous rambling. "Whatever you think is best. We'll figure it out." "You say that a lot." "Because it's true. We'll figure it out as we go." That night, they ordered pizza and ate on the floor because there wasn't a table yet. Emma and Jackson sat together, Emma explaining her elaborate color-coding system for organizing her shark books, while Jackson listened with the patient attention he gave to subjects that genuinely interested him. Lucas watched Sophia watching them, saw the hope and fear playing across her face, and reached for her hand. "They're going to be okay," he said quietly. "Yeah?" "Yeah." After dinner, Emma insisted on showing Jackson everything important in the neighborhood, which apparently meant the park 2 blocks away. Sophia and Lucas followed at a distance, watching their kids run ahead, Emma's hand grabbing Jackson's to pull him toward the swings. "This is surreal," Sophia said. "You're actually here, in California, moving in with me. Sometimes I still can't believe we're doing this." "Having second thoughts?" "Hourly, but I'm doing it anyway." She leaned into him as they walked. "Lucas?" "Yeah?" "Thank you for being brave enough to uproot your entire life for this. I know it wasn't easy. Best decision I ever made." "You don't know that yet. We could be a complete disaster." "We could be, but I don't think we will be." The first week was chaos. The moving truck arrived and suddenly the apartment was full of boxes. 2 families' worth of belongings trying to fit into shared space. Lucas and Sophia spent 3 days unpacking and rearranging, discovering incompatibilities. His preference for minimalism versus her need for visual warmth. His organized systems versus her creative chaos. They had their first real fight on day 4 over kitchen organization. Voices raised while the kids watched television in the other room, both of them exhausted and overwhelmed. "I'm just saying there's a logical way to organize dishes, and throwing them randomly in cabinets is not it," Lucas said, more sharply than intended. "And I'm saying that maybe your logical way doesn't account for how an actual family uses a kitchen. We need things accessible, not filed away like we're running a restaurant." "So my way is wrong?" "I didn't say that." "You implied it." Sophia threw the dish towel on the counter. "You know what? Fine. Organize it however you want. I'll just relearn where everything is in my own kitchen." She walked out, and Lucas stood surrounded by boxes feeling like an idiot. This was their home now, not his space or hers. Shared space, shared decisions, shared life. He found her on the small balcony, arms crossed, staring at nothing. "I'm sorry," he said. "That was stupid. It doesn't matter how the dishes are organized." "It kind of does, though, because it's not really about dishes. It's about 2 people who've been making their own decisions for years suddenly having to compromise on everything." "Yeah." Lucas stood next to her, not touching, but present. "This is harder than I thought it would be." "Me too, and we haven't even dealt with the big stuff yet. Schools for Jackson, your job search, figuring out custody schedules and discipline, and whose parenting style wins when we disagree. We'll figure it out." "You keep saying that." "Because I believe it." He reached for her hand. "We're going to fight. We're going to drive each other crazy. But we're also going to make this work because the alternative is giving up, and I'm not doing that." Sophia was quiet for a moment. "The dishes can go wherever you think makes sense. I'll adjust. Or we can find a third way that works for both of us." "That sounds exhausting." "Probably, but also fair. But also—" She leaned her head on his shoulder, and they stood like that until Emma appeared in the doorway, asking if they were fighting and if they were going to break up like her dad did with her mom. The fear in her voice cut through everything else, and both Lucas and Sophia immediately crouched down to her level. "No, baby," Sophia said firmly. "We're not breaking up. Grown-ups sometimes disagree about things, but that doesn't mean we stop caring about each other. But Daddy used to fight with you and then he left." "Lucas isn't your father," Sophia said gently. "And fighting about where dishes go is very different from the kind of problems your dad and I had. We're okay. I promise." Emma looked at Lucas for confirmation. "You're staying?" "I'm staying," Lucas said without hesitation. "Even when your mom and I disagree about stuff. Even when things are hard. I'm not going anywhere." Emma seemed satisfied with this and ran off to find Jackson. Sophia and Lucas stayed crouched on the floor, looking at each other. "Well," Sophia said, "that's going to be a theme, isn't it? Emma waiting for the other shoe to drop. Jackson does the same thing. Every time I go to the store, he asks if I'm coming back." Lucas stood up and pulled Sophia with him. "We just have to keep showing them, consistently, that we're not going anywhere." By the end of month 1, they'd established something resembling a routine. Jackson started at the same school as Emma, which meant morning drop-offs were chaotic but manageable. Lucas had found consulting work with a firm in downtown LA, flexible hours that let him actually be present for dinner and bedtime. Sophia continued her freelance design work from home, which meant she was the default parent for pickups and afternoon activities. They learned each other's rhythms. Sophia woke early and needed coffee in silence before she could handle conversation. Lucas was a night person who did his best thinking after the kids were asleep. Emma was a morning tornado of energy while Jackson needed slow, gentle coaxing into consciousness. They figured out meal planning, Emma's food preferences versus Jackson's limited palate creating menus that required negotiation. They navigated bedtime routines, combining Sophia's story time with Lucas's elaborate tucking-in process into something that worked for both kids. It wasn't smooth. There were plenty of nights when they fell into bed exhausted, wondering what they'd gotten themselves into. Times when Jackson cried for his grandmother or his old room. Times when Emma melted down because things were different now and she didn't like different. Times when Lucas and Sophia snapped at each other over minor things because they were carrying too much stress. But there were also perfect moments. Emma teaching Jackson how to identify different shark species at the aquarium they visited on weekends. Jackson showing Emma his elaborate Lego creations, her genuine awe making him glow with pride. The four of them cooking dinner together, flour everywhere, and music too loud and laughter that felt like what family was supposed to sound like. 3 months in, Lucas woke up early on a Sunday and found Sophia already awake, sitting on the balcony with her coffee and sketchpad. He poured his own coffee and joined her, looking at what she was drawing. A rough sketch of their apartment's courtyard, the jacaranda tree just starting to bloom. "You're painting again," he observed. "Trying to. I've been getting up early a few times a week, working on stuff that's just for me." She showed him the sketchpad, filled with drawings and watercolor studies. "Feels good. Feels like I'm remembering who I am outside of being Emma's mom." "These are beautiful. They're rough, but it's a start." She set down the pad and looked at him. "How are you doing? Really? You don't talk much about how you're adjusting." Lucas considered the question honestly. "It's different than I expected. Harder in some ways, easier in others. I miss my mom. I miss the familiarity of New York. But I don't miss being alone. I don't miss coming home to an empty apartment and wondering if this is all my life gets to be." "Do you regret moving here?" "Not even a little bit." "Do you regret letting me?" "Only when you reorganize my art supplies without asking," she said, but she was smiling. "We're really doing this, making it work." "Yeah, we are. It's not perfect. Nothing ever is, but it's ours." Sophia leaned against him, and they sat watching the morning light change the color of everything, comfortable in silence. This had become one of Lucas's favorite parts of their new life. These quiet moments before the kids woke up and chaos descended, when it was just the two of them remembering why they'd chosen this. 6 months after the move, Lucas planned a surprise. He'd been thinking about it for weeks, running the idea past his mother and Sophia's mom, Patricia, making arrangements with a level of secrecy that felt ridiculous but necessary. On a Saturday in October, Exactly 1 year since that first visit to California, he told Sophia they were going out for dinner, just the two of them. Patricia would watch the kids. "What's the occasion?" Sophia asked, suspicious. "Does there need to be an occasion? You've been weird all week, planning something." "Maybe I just want to take my girlfriend out for a nice dinner." "Girlfriend? That's such a weird word when you're 32. What would you prefer, partner, significant other, that woman I share a bathroom with?" Sophia laughed. "All terrible options. Let's stick with girlfriend." Lucas had made reservations at the Monarch Hotel, the same place where Bradley and Michelle had gotten married, where table 19 had changed everything. He hadn't told Sophia where they were going, just that she should dress nice. When they pulled up to the hotel, she turned to him with wide eyes. "Lucas, this is where we met. Yeah. Why are we here?" "You'll see." They checked in at the restaurant, and the hostess led them through the familiar ballroom, now set up for a different event but still recognizable. And there, in the far corner, was a table with a small placard that read 19. Sophia stopped walking. "You didn't." "I did. I called in a favor with Bradley. They're not using this section tonight, so he arranged for us to have table 19 for dinner. That's the most ridiculous romantic gesture I've ever heard." "Is that a complaint?" "Absolutely not." She was crying, just a little, and Lucas handed her a tissue he'd definitely prepared for this exact moment. "I can't believe you did this." They sat at table 19, the forgotten corner that had been the beginning of everything, and it felt both exactly the same and completely different. The ballroom was quieter tonight. No wedding celebration, just low music and the soft murmur of the restaurant. But sitting across from Sophia, watching her smile at him with that same expression from a year ago, Lucas felt the weight of everything they'd built settle into something solid and real. "This time last year, I was sitting here convinced I was making a huge mistake," Sophia said. Sophia's talking to a stranger about things I never talked about, feeling things I told myself I was too broken to feel. And now? Now I'm sitting here with someone who's seen me at my worst and hasn't run away, who moved his entire life to be with me, who loves my daughter like she's his own. She reached across the table and took his hand. Now I'm not afraid anymore. Lucas had prepared a whole speech, had rehearsed it with his mother, written it down, practiced in front of the mirror. But sitting there with Sophia, all of it disappeared and he was left with just the truth. "I love you," he said simply. "I love you and Emma and the life we're building together. I love coming home to chaos and noise and someone who reorganizes the kitchen at 2 a.m. I love watching you paint and seeing you remember who you are outside of being a parent. I love us, messy and imperfect and real." Sophia was fully crying now. "I love you too, so much it still scares me sometimes." "Good, as long as we're scared together." Lucas stood up and moved around the table, pulling something from his pocket. "Sophia Bennett, I know we've only been doing this for 6 months. I know it's fast and probably crazy, and there are a million reasons to wait, but I don't want to wait. I want to build a life with you, officially, permanently. I want Emma and Jackson to be siblings for real. I want to wake up every day knowing that this is forever." He dropped to one knee and Sophia's hands flew to her mouth. "Will you marry me?" The ring was simple. A single diamond on a silver band, nothing flashy, just beautiful in its straightforwardness. Sophia stared at it, then at Lucas, then back at the ring. "Are you sure?" she whispered. "Because if we do this, that's it. You're stuck with me and all my mess and Emma's shark obsession and middle-of-the-night kitchen reorganization. I'm counting on it. And Jackson's pickiness, and your coffee mugs everywhere, and both of us being terrible at compromise? Especially that. Then yes, obviously yes." Lucas slipped the ring onto her finger and kissed her, and somewhere in the ballroom someone started clapping. They pulled apart to find the restaurant staff watching, several of them with phones out recording the moment. Sophia laughed and buried her face in Lucas's shoulder, and he held her thinking about the impossible journey from table 19 to here. They had dinner, though later neither of them could remember what they ate. They talked about logistics, when to tell the kids, when to actually get married, where to have the wedding. Sophia wanted something small, just family and close friends. Lucas agreed immediately, having zero interest in a big production. They settled on spring, giving them time to plan, but not so long that it felt distant. "Emma's going to lose her mind," Sophia said, looking at her ring like she couldn't quite believe it was real. Jackson, too. He's been asking when you were going to officially be his stepmom. They've been conspiring, haven't they? Planning this whole thing. Almost certainly. When they got home, Patricia was waiting with a knowing smile and two very excited kids who'd apparently been in on the secret. "Did you ask her?" Emma demanded the second they walked in the door. "Did she say yes? Are you getting married?" Lucas looked at Sophia, who was laughing and crying at the same time. "Yeah, we're getting married." Emma screamed and launched herself at both of them. Jackson followed more cautiously, but his smile was enormous. "So Emma's going to be my real sister now?" "Real stepsister," Lucas corrected. "But yeah, we're going to be a real family." "We already were," Jackson said with 4-year-old wisdom. "But now it's official." Patricia congratulated them and left, and the four of them stood in their living room, boxes still unpacked in corners, Emma's shark posters next to Jackson's dinosaur drawings. Two families blended into one chaotic whole. "So what now?" Sophia asked. "Now we figure out wedding planning while managing 2 kids and jobs and regular life," Lucas said. "Sounds impossible." "Most things worth doing are." They spent the rest of the evening celebrating with ice cream and letting the kids stay up late. Emma already planning her flower girl dress, and Jackson asking if he got to wear a suit like a grown-up. Lucas watched Sophia negotiate with their children, the ring catching light every time she gestured, and felt a peace he'd never quite experienced before. This was home, not a place or a city, but these 3 people and the life they were building together. Messy and imperfect, and sometimes overwhelming, but theirs. The wedding happened on a Saturday in April, almost exactly 18 months after Table 19. They kept it small like Sophia wanted, just family and a handful of close friends, ceremony at a garden venue overlooking the ocean. Emma wore a purple dress because of course she did, and carried a bouquet with flowers, and somehow also shark stickers. Jackson served as ring bearer with the seriousness of someone entrusted with a critical mission. Margaret flew in from New York and spent the entire ceremony crying happy tears. Patricia sat next to her, equally emotional. Bradley and Michelle came, Michelle whispering to Lucas before the ceremony that she'd known all along they were perfect for each other. When Sophia walked down the aisle, no father to give her away, just her and Emma hand in hand, Lucas felt everything else disappear. This woman who'd been a stranger at a wedding, who'd become his best friend through phone calls and distance, who'd taken a chance on him and his son, and built something neither of them thought possible. The ceremony was short and personal. They'd written their own vows, both of them crying through them, promising not perfection, but presence, not ease, but effort, not a fairy tale, but something real and lasting. "I promise to love you through the chaos," Sophia said, voice shaking. "To keep choosing you even when it's hard. To build a life with you that's messy and beautiful and ours." "I promise to show up every day," Lucas said. "To never stop fighting for us. To love Emma like my own. To give Jackson a family that's whole and real." They exchanged rings, hers the engagement ring, his a simple band, and the officiant pronounced them married. Lucas kissed his wife, and Emma and Jackson cheered, and somewhere in the chaos of celebration, Lucas thought about seating arrangements and forgotten corners and the absolutely random chance that had led him to sit down at table 19. Except it hadn't been random. It had been Michelle seeing something he couldn't see yet. 2 lonely people who needed each other. An opportunity for connection that neither of them were looking for but both desperately needed. At the reception, small dinner under string lights, the ocean providing soundtrack, Lucas found himself standing with Sophia, watching Emma teach Jackson some kind of dance she'd apparently invented. "We did it," Sophia said. "Actually made it work." "Did you doubt we would?" "Every single day. Still do sometimes." "Yeah, me too." Lucas pulled her closer. "But we're doing it anyway. Together. Together." The evening stretched into night, celebration giving way to quieter moments. Lucas danced with Emma, who stood on his shoes while he swayed. Sophia danced with Jackson, who was getting tired but fighting sleep with determination. They cut a cake that Emma had helped design, decorated with both dinosaurs and sharks because compromise applied to desserts, too. Later, after the kids had been collected by Patricia for a sleepover and the guests had said their goodbyes, Lucas and Sophia stood alone on the beach near the venue. Sophia's dress was slightly sandy at the hem. Lucas's tie was loose, and neither of them cared. So this is it, Sophia said. We're married, actually married. Having second thoughts?
About 1,000, but I'm doing it anyway.
Lucas laughed and pulled her close, her head fitting perfectly under his chin, like it always did. Thank you. For what? For taking a chance on the guy at table 19, for letting me into your life and Emma's life, for being brave enough to build something new when we'd both been hurt so badly before. Thank you for seeing me that night, for not walking away when you could have, for moving your entire life to be with us. She looked up at him, mascara slightly smudged, smile radiant, for showing me that broken people can find each other and build something whole. They stood on the beach, waves providing rhythm, stars emerging overhead, and Lucas thought about all the versions of himself that had led to this moment. The one who'd gone to a wedding alone and desperate. The one who'd taken a risk on late-night phone calls and cross-country visits. The one who'd packed up his life and moved 3,000 miles for love. And this version, standing with his wife on a beach, married and terrified and happier than he'd ever imagined possible. You know what's funny? Sophia said eventually. If Bradley and Michelle hadn't seated us at table 19, if they'd put us anywhere else, we might never have talked. Might have spent the whole wedding being miserable in separate corners. But they did seat us there. Yeah, they did. The forgotten table, where nobody wanted to be. Turns out it was exactly where we needed to be. Sophia smiled and kissed him, and Lucas kissed her back. And somewhere in the distance he could hear the ocean and the remnants of celebration and the promise of a future that was messy and imperfect, and theirs. Table 19 had been where the forgotten guests sat, the overlooked corner, the place for people who came alone. But for Lucas and Sophia, it had been the beginning of everything. Two lonely people finding each other. Two broken families becoming one whole one. Two people brave enough to choose love over fear, connection over safety, together over alone. And that, Lucas thought as he held his wife on a beach in California, was worth every risk they'd taken to get here. Some stories started at the center of attention, under spotlights and celebration. Theirs had started in a corner, at a table nobody wanted, with two people who'd given up on finding this. But they'd found it anyway. Found each other. Found home. And that was more than enough.